we place firmly on the right side of the farm. Young Zimbabweans occupy most positions among them girls and people with disabilities, debating with confidence and clarity, not as guests, not as afterthought, but as leaders in their own right, regardless of gender and ability. His speaker said, among the robust debaters, I formed two students from Ted High, a Zion Christian Church mission, Honorable Leona Cobb, who is the Deputy Minister of Environment and Tourism. I was struck by the debate and I quote, sanitary pads are not a luxury but a hygiene necessity. We plead for pad dispensers in public toilets as we see condoms in public toilets, even in this parliament building. It is the direct fruits of the leadership and vision of His Excellency Dr. Mnangagwa and Excellency Dr. Mnangagwa, whose talent work for women and children and persons living with disability to fulfill the mantra of His norm in no place behind, as continue to open doors which were used to be closed. I therefore urge this House to take note of this Junior Parliament session as a signal of the Zimbabwe being held today, tomorrow, and forever. I submit.
Thank you very much for your statement. I move that order number 1 to 12 is to open order number 10. Any second? Thank you. Notice of motion number 13, Honorable Zuko.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I rise to present the report of the Joint Committee on Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs and tonight's Committee on Culture and Heritage on the petition review and heritage conservation on the recognition of Korekore language as an official language in the Constitution of
Okay.
Who seconds?
I second.
Honorable who?
Shivitenga.
Honorable Chief. Thank you. The Honorable Zuko may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Always the 2nd November 2025, the National Assembly received a petition from Land Conservation Heritage District Parliament to exercise its constitutional mandate by amending the legislative provisions of Section 6 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe to include the Korekore language as an official language. The petition was referred to the Parliamentary Affairs and the Select Committee on Culture and Heritage. The Joint Committee considered the petition of prayer. The petition of the Chief Parliament to be the following. 1. To undertake the urgent review of Section 6 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe to include the Korekore language as one of the official languages of Zimbabwe, not only in keeping with the dictates of the Constitution, but also in line with Zimbabwe's obligations and to the United Nations. Consider the reasons for consideration during the implementation of Section 6 of the Constitution. The objectives. Its inquiry, the committee was guided by the following objectives. 1. To identify legislative gaps with regard to indigenous language languages, and 2, to present the Joint Committee's recommendations to both houses. Methodology. During this inquiry, the committee received and considered the petition and deliberated on it, and the following were our findings. Section 2 of the Constitution is about referred to as the Constitution, refers that the Constitution is the supreme law of the country, and any law, practice, custom, or conduct inconsistent with it is invalid to the extent of the inconsistency. Section 16 of the Constitution provides for promotion and preservation of culture and heritage, and mandates the state and agencies of government to promote and preserve cultural values and practices which enhance dignity, well-being, and health. Section 6, subsection 1 of the Constitution provides that the following languages, namely Chewa, Chibabe, English, Kalanga, Khoisan, Nika, Ndao, Tigray, Shangana, Shona, Sign Language, Soto, Tonga, Tswana, Venda, and Xhosa are officially recognized languages in Zimbabwe. Article 14 and 16 of the United Nations further state that indigenous people have the right to establish their educational systems and media in their own languages and have access to education in their own language. Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention number 169 of the International Labour Organization.
Order.
Linguistic
Order. Honorable members, there is substance of your internet, and listen to the debate. Please proceed.
we proceed to linguistic analysis. The joint committees believed Kore should be regarded as dialect within the broader Shona language cluster. It was mentioned that Shona is composed of several mutually intelligible dialects, including Zulu, which is spoken primarily in Mashonaland Central, Mashonaland East, and Bari, Karanga, found mainly in Makingo and parts of Midlands, Maika, prevalent in Maikule. Kore is spoken in Mashonaland Central, particularly the Bari area, as well as parts of Mashonaland West and Northern Zimbabwe, and Ndao, spoken mainly in Chipinge and Chimaliland, which is recognized separately in the Constitution. The committee acknowledges the complex and often contentious nature of the distinction between a language and dialect. Granting official language status to every dialect could technically open the door to numerous similar claims, given that nearly every language community in Zimbabwe contains internal dialect variations. The observations are that the committee was concerned that recognizing every dialect as a separate transition language would fragment national unity, and therefore the committee concluded that Kore language was one of the dialects of Shonan languages and hence cannot be recognized as official language but as a dialect. The petitioner's claims of inclusion was supported. The committee's recommendations. The Joint Committee concluded that the petition does not carry the legal merit, that one of the powers of the Parliament of Zimbabwe to institute proceedings for the amendment of Section 6 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe for Kore language is a dialect of Shona language. The Joint Committee accordingly recommend that the petition be dismissed. The committee further recommends that management of the ministries and agencies in collaboration with cultural institutions be encouraged to promote preservation of all dialects within the Shona language cluster, including Kore through educational materials, cultural programs, and research initiatives, thereby ensuring their vitality and cultural heritage of the speakers. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee acknowledges the cultural significance and the sentiments underlying the petitioner's request to recognize as a official language. The Constitution of Zimbabwe, under Section 6, provides a framework for the recognition and promotion of officially recognized languages, and the committees are mindful of the state's duty under Section 16 to promote and preserve cultural values and practices that enhance dignity and well-being. However, the committee concluded that Kore is a dialect within the Shona language cluster, which already enjoys official language status. The Shona language is officially recognized encompassing several mutually intelligible dialects, including Kore, Zulu, Karaka, Manda, and Mara. Therefore, the Joint Committee concludes that the petition lacks sufficient legal and linguistic merit to warrant the initiation of proceedings for the amendment of Section 6 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. The merit to include Kore as a separate official language is not supported. So, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. The question before the House is a motion by the Honorable Zobo that this House considers and adopts the report of the Joint Portfolio Committee on Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs and the Thematic Committee on Culture and Heritage on the recognition of the Kore language as an official language in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Is there any debate? Honorable Shiri Agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the two committees for considering this petition and also the recommendations which I fully subscribe to. Mr. Speaker, as a curriculum person, I agree with the petitioners to the effect that the language is which is distinctive vocabulary. Its pronunciation is similar to, it's different also. The idioms, the cultural expression is equally different from other Shona dialects. However, Mr. Speaker, I concur and I fully subscribe to the recommendations of the committee on the following basis. First, Mr. Speaker, Kore is a dialect rather than a separate language. It is also regarded as one of the major dialects from together with the Zulu, Karanga, Mandika, and Dada. And Mr. Speaker, those dialects are relatively similar and they kind of intertwine. Therefore, I strongly, this is why I do not believe that corresponding dialects should be considered as different. Mr. Speaker, given that we have several Shona dialects, what it means is that if we recognize it as a separate language, we risk having a constitutional of perennial change and the growing use of official language. I say so, Mr. Speaker, because you have a situation whereby these Zulus and the Karangas also have parliament and also demand similar action. So this is why I certainly believe that since it's a dialect, we should consider it as such. And what we should do also is to honor the language, our native language, all facets at our workplace and wherever. Also, Mr. Speaker, in recognizing Kore Kore, like any other dialect, what it means is that there are serious implications with respect to administrative and financial costs. I say so, Mr. Speaker, because that calls for example, the issue of translation. We now need to engage more translators to translate for example, our government documents, educational materials, and public information. And also, what it means, Mr. Speaker, even if we look at our education syllabus, we will need now to start writing textbooks and getting teachers, recruiting more teachers that speak the language, and also getting ZIMSEC to examine the subject, which has serious cost implications. So, Mr. Speaker, on that basis, I strongly feel that yes, we need Kore Kore is a dialect. We need to promote it, but in this regard, I feel that it would be inappropriate, to consider it as one of our official languages, given that we have other dialects out there, just like Kore Kore language, which might need a similar recognition if we do consider it as an official language. So I submit.
There's a Deputy Minister from Sports, Culture, Recreation. Would have given them a response, an opportunity to respond, so that we close the debate and adopt the report. Pardon? Yes, debate. This is further debate, yes. You put me into some habit which I think I must disengage from. According to my list here, there are only 2 members written down for debate. I'm used to getting a list. All right. I was guided by the list here, as usual. So we open the debate. Is there any further debate?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
With all due respect to the honorable members' desire to debate, I think if we can stick to the way we are doing business here, it will be fair to everybody. When the order paper comes to members, it is important that they indicate that they want to debate, so that we move to other orders very fast and do more business. But if somebody then ambush to come and debate when we feel we've structured our debates to include other orders, then somebody just come after that, it will undermine the whipping system of this house.
Mr. Speaker, sir? Mr. Speaker, sir? On a point of... I have not responded. Don't jump the gun. I have not responded. I have not responded. The government chief whip is correct, according to what I have here. For example, On order paper number 14, I have 4 members of parliament who would like to debate. Order number 15, I have 3. Order number 20, I have 4 members who would like to debate. And then order number 50, I have 4 members who would like to debate. So, without compromising, your arrangements, if other members would like to debate, we'll open the debate accordingly. Yes, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. Honorable
Mushoriwa.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, before I actually submit my debate, I just want to advise that we actually submitted our names. Unfortunately, maybe the timing, by the time the report was then submitted, but we indicated that we wanted to debate. Mr. Speaker, I've read
indicated to who?
To
the whip.
Yes, to the whip.
So is your word against the non-writing of by the chief whip?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Let lying dogs lie. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to the petition when you read it in the House, and I've also listened to the report by the joint committees pertaining to the request by the Korekore people. We have requested that Korekore be regarded as a separate language. I have been fortunate in my other life to have worked within the Korekore area, the areas of Mount Darwin and the parts of National Central. Mr. Speaker, before colonialism...
Don't create a mystery by saying other life. We begin to speculate a lot.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, before Parliament, I was a banker, and I was actually, most of my clients were in the National Central. So, Mr. Speaker, before colonialism came, people in this country, between Limpopo and Zambezi, they used not to be called Shonas. There were Sabanyikas, there were Zulus, there were Karangas, there were Korekores. The question of Shona did not come from us as Africans, but it was the standard Shona that was done and defined by missionaries. And in their definition of standard Shona, they then considered the Zulu and the Karanga as the dominant contributors to what we now call standard Shona. And what has happened, Mr. Speaker, is that when you traverse the Korekore areas and you are a Shona-speaking person like me, sometimes you can hardly communicate with the people on the ground. The reason being, Mr. Speaker, is that there is a difference in terms of how we communicate. The missionaries, when they were doing this, they were doing it for administrative purposes. But we need to understand that one of the worst things that you can do to a people is to tamper with their cultural, their language, and the manner in which they speak. If you look at the manner in which the Korekore speaks, Mr. Speaker, you will see that even in terms of their proverbs, in terms of their tongue, their tone of words in terms of the other manners in which they actually subscribe, you then come to a realization that there is a difference. The portfolio committee argues and says that if we're going to allow this to be language, it will then create a floodgate for all other people to then claim that they also need to be considered as a language. But, Mr. Speaker, I am of the opinion that the committee needed to have gone further. Part of the problem that we face in this country, especially this side of Zimbabwe, if you check of all the people when they write their Shona, and this is one thing that I think is crucial, if you check the grade 7 results for Shona, for people, the Korekore child, when he or she writes grade 7, their performance, I'm not talking of Maths, I'm not talking of English, I'm talking of Shona, which is supposed to be their mother language. They are supposed to then write grade 7 Shona, but they are actually at a disadvantage. And part of the problem, which if it cannot be addressed by saying that Korekore is a language, but part of the problem, Mr. Speaker, says that if you look into the standard Shona, you can hardly come up with the Korekore wording that you would actually find. Even if you are going to take an exam paper of a grade 7 Shona, it will be difficult for a Korekore to look at, literally look and find some wording that can feel a Korekore child sitting in Mount Darwin to feel that he or she is actually writing or answering his or her own mother language. And it's my own view, Mr. Speaker, say that I understand that the Constitution is currently positioned, did not include the Korekore as a language, they put it under Shona. But I'm actually of the feeling that the recommendation by the portfolio committee should actually have gone deeper and compel the Ministry of Culture to actually ensure that we don't leave other people behind. We need to make sure that our Shona speaks not only to the Zezuru, not only to the Karanga, but the Manyikas, the Korekores, they also need to feel to be part and parcel, not only of Zimbabwe, they also need to feel to be part and parcel of this group now called the Shona. And we are also even further away, Mr. Speaker, say that if we don't do that, you get certain names being given. When you go there, you talk to them, they'll call you certain names because they think that you are trying to dominate them, the Korekores. And some of them, when you talk to them, they actually think that 20 years, 30 years from now, there will not be anyone who will be in a position to speak and teach people a proper Korekore. But I think it is important. Zimbabwe is built not on the standardized languages that we use. It is built based on our different dialects that we use at home, different phonology, different tones that we use. And it is my view that in as much as the committee have said they've found no merit in this petition, but I actually feel that there is a need for the nation to actually go deeper and see what are the challenges that the Korekores are facing. And I was not also aware in the report, one of the things that I would even have loved to see was actually also the submissions that which were made by people from the Korekore who actually came to give their own views before Parliament. Because I actually think that crossing them like this may not be the best thing for Zimbabwe. Let's try by all means to bring everybody. Otherwise, it will be a disaster as we go on. Because people will think that this language they think is their superior, they are better Shona, or they are the superior Shona. When in actual fact, everyone, one of us, has a right to be heard and a right to communicate in a language that he or she understands. Our mother language is important. Mr. Speaker say, I just thought, not being a Korekore myself, but having interacted with the Korekore, I think they've got a case, though it may not have probably met the required standard from the portfolio committee. But I think the nation and the Ministry of Culture needs to do better in terms of making sure that they incorporate these people into Shona so that they also partake in this language. I thank you.
Further debate? Further debate?
You read your standing orders. I've not called for debate. All right? Honorable Mjoriwa and the others, it will be very interesting to find out how the nomenclature Korikori emerged. I'm not part of the debate, but I'm posing to you to do some further research. Any further debate? Yes. Honorable Engineer Magwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for indulging me. As a proud son of a Zezuru man and a Korekore lady, I feel I need to add my voice. Mr. Speaker, I was disheartened by the contributions and recommendations that came from the committee. Why do I say this, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I had to endure in primary school, having to be helped by my mother do homework in Korekore. That would be marked wrong simply because the standard Shona does not necessarily have room for Korekore. Mr. Speaker, there is a risk for the already marginalized groups that are Korekore of having extinction, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, for us to fear administration, for us to fear the cost that comes with giving people a right that they have been denied by the colonial powers when we were clustered into a language that never existed, that is called Shona. It's not only unfair to the Korekore people, but it slows their progression. Mr. Speaker, historically it's known that those from Masvingo and other areas had missionaries well before the people in Korekore areas. Thus, the language that developed, which is Shona, is predominantly dialects like Zezuru and Karanga, and little, if any, of Korekore. So it is an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and we should thank these people that brought the petition, that they have opened our eyes to what people have suffered for the last 43 years. Mr. Speaker, I'm also privileged to be a member of parliament of an area where there is more Korekore than Zezuru.
Did you say for the last 43 years?
46.
46?
Yes.
You mean Korekore is as old as that or is beyond?
Before that, it was the colonial architects of Shona. And when it was now independence, it is us who should self-determine. And the same people who are supposed to self-determine are not giving an opportunity to the Korekore people. Mr. Speaker, as I progress, I want to take an example of South Africa. In South Africa, Mr. Speaker, there is a language that can be clustered as one, which is the Nguni language. The Xhosas, the Ngunis that are Ndebeles, the Ngunis that are Zulu, they have a clear distinction, despite there being similarities. If you go to the language, which is called Sotho, if you go to Limpopo, you have your northern Sotho, which is called Pedi. You have your southern Sotho, which is spoken in the Free State. You go to the northwest, you have Tswana. But these people, their languages have more similarities than what standard Shona and Korekore have. Mr. Speaker, it is important that as an August House, we give an opportunity to the Korekore people to have the richness they have. There is so much difference. And because of this perpetuation, majority of Kore people suffer self-esteem issues. These issues need to be helped by them being recognized that they have their own language. Mr. Speaker, if this opens floodgates that we have more than one language, if you go to West Africa, there are more than 64 languages in Nigeria that are recognized. If you go to Ghana, there is a plethora of languages that are there. There is nothing difficult about accepting what was called as 5 dialects of Shona to become languages, because we are different and there is unity in diversity. Diversity should not be looked as a disadvantage. Diversity should be an opportunity for us to showcase how God made us different. I so submit and plead to the committee that let's give an opportunity to the people of the Kore people. And I speak as one of their grandchildren, and I speak as a member of parliament of people who are Kore. I so submit.
Any further debate?
Debate.
Yes, Honorable Togareti. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ndinoda kuti sendinowirirana nevakaenda kunoongorora zvemitauro. Mitauro yedu yakawanda, asi tinofanira kusvika panguva yokuti ishandisike ive mitauro yenyika yatinokwanisa kushandisa kuita mabasa akasiyana siyana. Mubato echigaro ndingada kukupai mufananidzo wekumasvingo kwavari kungoita sevari kutaura nezvako. Kumasvingo hakuna chikaranga chakafanana. Mukaenda kwaChivi vana matauri avo akatosiyana nokwaGutu, akatosiyana nokuZaka, akatosiyana nokubhikita. Vanhu ivavo vakatosiyana matauri avo, asi vanokwanisa kutaura pakati pavo. Ndinofunga kuti vaiita ongororo yezveutauro vakatarisa kuti zvakasiyana zvakawanda here kudarika zvakafanana. Ndokubva vabatanidza izvozvo ndokuona kuti kana tikatora zvakafanana zvose tikazviisa, tinopedzisira tava nomutauro unonzwisisika navanhu vose vatingati kana tikati Shona hongu tinowana tsananguro dzakawanda kuti Shona zvakabvepi. Asi mukatarisa nyaya yechikorekore, chiZezuru, chiKaranga, chiManyika nechiNdau, zviro kwazvo ndezvokuti zvose zvakasiyana. Asi vanhu ava vose kana ukavaisa panhu pamwe chete vanotaura vose, vanototaura vese. Ini ndikasangana nokwaChivi kana ndikataura zvokuti Mr. Speaker ndikati ini ndinogwara, handiti ndenda kwaChivi, ukaenda kwaGutu vanoti ndinorwara, handiti. Asi vanhu ava vanotaura vese vachiziva kuti zvinorevei, handiti. Saka handidi kuti titsimbirire mumwe mitauro kuti isataurwa kana kuti, asi kana takanangana nemitauro yatingati national languages muchirungu, kana kuti mitauro yenyika yedu, tikaipatsanura muno muZimbabwe tinogona kuita 100 mitauro iyoyi. Zvinozoshandisika here mukurarama kwedu? Tikati toda kunyora bvunzo, tonyora bvunzo dzatinoti chiShona nemipanda yechiShona yacho yose dzoita 100. Tinokwanisa here kuzonyatsotungamirira bandiko redu rezvedzidzo tichivavarira izvozvo? Ini ndinofunga kuti isu senyika ngatingokurudzira kuti vechikorekore ngavatenderwe zvavo kutaura mutauro wavo, wokwaChivi vatenderwe kutaura havo vachiti kugwara, asi kuti tizozvishandisa semutauro yenyika, ndinofunga kuti tingakonzera dambudziko ratisingazogoni kunyatsofamba naro zvakanaka. asi ndinowirirana kuti mitauro yedu yose nokusiyana kwayo hakunawo pagutu wakamboti asangana nawo kwachiri woti we mutauro waunoita uyu hausiwo. Tinongotaura tichindonzwisisana kuti avashandisa G avashandisa R. Totowirirana izvozvo, hakuna unovhinza nezvake. Mukaendawo kuchikore nokunenzi kuchizezuru, mitauro yavo iri pedo napedo zvikuru. Asi pane pazvinondosiyana hongu, asi kuti tikozozvisiyanisa toti toda kuti vamwe navamwe vazvimirire. Ndinofunga tine tatanga kuenda kwakakura. Ndatenda.
Tatenda chaizvo Honorable Togareki. Ko ungamataura zvakanaka makamazvivisirei panhau nevanhu vanofana kutaura. Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not waste much of the House time. I will be pointed. My quest for standing, Mr. Speaker, is to demystify the notion that the committee aired and failed the quest for recognition of the Korogori people. Mr. Speaker, Shona is not singular, it embodies a number of dialects. Perhaps what other honorable members should be requesting is that when ZIMS sets its exams, it also caters for those dialects, particularly the Korekore language that has been brought before the House. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, as the Chief Whip has rightly raised, the idea of unit is defeated if we create small silos within the nation of Zimbabwe. That is my point. I so submit, and I thank you.
In further debate, Honorable Mapi.
Bado wechigaro nekudipo mukana wakadai kuona kwangu ndaona sekomiti yakaita pa marecommendations ekomiti kana kuti zvakataurwa nekomiti zviri zvechokwadi kana kuti zviri zvechaizvo nokuti wakatarisa zviperengo zvemutauro unenge uchitaurwa unoona kuti zvinenge zvakati fanana. Manzwa akawanda anenge achishandiswa anenge akawanda, asi panozotariswa chete kudhonzwa kworurimi pakutaura, ndipo paunozoona kuti panenge pane musauko unenge uripo. Asi ukatotarisa zvese zvinenge zvakanaka. Ndoda kuti titore inzwi rashandiswa nekomiti, yashandisa inzwi rokuti cluster, wati chikorikori chiri mugapu kana kuti muhari yakabikirwa, dai kuri kunyama inonzi makanyanyisi, asi ichidyika nyama yacho. Makanyanyisi inyama dzakasiyana siyana dzinoti kana vakadya dzinenge dzichirakidza zvimwe chete parurimi. Saka ipapo ndo patozotarisa senyika kuti tikadzimara tazoti tidzipasanure, ukaona panyaya dzebvunzo dzataurwa zviperengo zvacho zvimwe chete, matauriro acho kana vakatarisa zvinhu zvacho zvinenge zviri zvimwe chete. Dai chiri chindau chokuti tinoti mese ivo wonzi teshe, wanenge wakaisa T isitaisi mese, asi kuchindau wanoti teshe. Kana tikati tiri kuda mukuru mudhara, uko wanoti muzaya kana kwa chindau. Kusiyana kwacho kunenge kwanyanya, nokuti kuchindau wanenge wakutora sekuTanzania wanoti muzee kureva munhu akura, wanozotiwo muzaya vachimwe vachiti musharukwa. Ndoma dai zvakasiyana kudaro. Zvino ukatarisa kuchikorikori wotarisa nechishona chataurwa, zvinoratidza kuti zvinenge zviri pamwe chete. Saka pamwe pacho ndangotiwo ndinase kubudisa pfungwa dzangu pachena kuti hongu vanga vane kodzero dzavo, asi kodzero yavo hayo haina kurasiwa, nekuti tiri kungotarisa panyaya vachirungu vanozoti ndakukota pachirungu vanozoti pronunciation is a matter of opinion. Kungoti pronounce, asi ukanasa kutarisa zvese zvinenge zvakafanana. Saka kana zvakafanana zviri mugapu rishona, zvinenge zvakatofanana. Saka kuti tizvipasanure zvakafanana, zvinenge zvakafanana. Maita basambato vechigara.
I recognize Honorable
Mwashuma, Honorable Speaker.
Nashon.
Honorable Speaker, inini ndiri mukomiti yejustice inotungamirirwa ndi Honorable Zhobwo, mwana wa the late Comrade Edson Zhobwo. Honorable Speaker, nyaya yekureketa takaona kuti magama mazhinji anoreketwa ari pashi peshona, vanhu vanava vakagumana, vari pamwepo vakumana, vakadhibana, vanozwisisana. Ndinopa mufanikiso wekuManicaland. KuManicaland vanhu avavo vanozwanana vechireketa, asi kureketa kwavo kwakasiyana. Mukazwa kureketa kunoita Mandau kuChipinge, kureketa kunoita Maungwe paMakoni, kureketa kunoita Vahera kuBwera, kureketa kunoita Samanyika, Mutare, Mutasa, kureketa kunoita Vahwesa kuNyanga. Asi tikadhibana tega tinozwanana. Komiti yakaona zvakakosha kuti tikavhura ndaya ineyi yekuti Maungwe bekai muconstitution, Wahwesa bekai muconstitution, Makorekore bekai muconstitution. Tinobeka vanhu vanodarika 200. Constitution yo bumbiro redu remutemo rinonga radzara zvemireketo inofana kureketwa munyika muno. Saka ngekuti komiti yejustice ibariwo nema-MP arimwo ane ndxondo dzakakudza, vanofunga kwemene. Ine maloya arimwo, ine madhokota arimwo, yeichewa ndi Edson Zhobwo. Takagara pashi, Honorable Zhobwo, takagara pashi tikazeya nyaya ineyi, tiri pamwepo ne-thematic committee kuSenate inosanganisira madzimambo, tikazwisisana. Munoona zvataurwa ndi Honorable Togarebi panapa kuti vanhu vachitora chikaranga vanofunga kuti chikaranga chakafanana, asi zvabuda panapa kuti chikaranga ehe pakureketa, asi mukaona vanhu vari Bhikita, vanhu vari Zaka, Gutu, Chivi, vanhu vanoreketa zvakasiyana. So Honorable Speaker, ndinoona zvakakosha kuti isusu sema-MP vanhu vanotaura pfungwa, vanorekete ndxondo dzavo, asi separliament tinozotarisa kuti senyika kuti tiende mberi zvakanakira nyika zvakakura ngezviri. Vanhu vakaona kuti chikorekore chiri kureketwa ndicho mushona, saka ngatisiye zvakadaro, tikabata ndaya dzine dzadzizoiti zvakanaka. Ndekuti munoona chinyi, Honorable Speaker, nyika ineyi mukaitarisa yeZimbabwe ine midzimu yehondo yakasiyana. Nyika ineyi yeZimbabwe kune mudzimu wehondo weMandau waitungamirirwa neNgungunyana, kune mudzimu wehondo wevanhu vekumakoni wanga unana Chingaira. Azviiti kuti mudzimu shavi rekutungamirira chinhu remhuri yekwasitole riende kotungamirira chinhu chemhuri yekwamuyambo. Apa ndinoda kuti chinhu hurumende yakazozviona zviri nani kuti hatingavapedzi veshe, ngatichibata mbuya nehanda ngatibate sekuru Kaguvi, asi pakureketa kwemene mene kumandau mudzimu wehondo hakuna mbuya nehanda, panga kuna ngungunyana ndiye waingeyo. Muripaona apa? Saka ndo zvakaonekwa zvagarirwa pashi, ndo zvetogarira pashi futi. Chikorekore achingangodekwi futi, tobeka chizezuru, tobeka chimanyika, tobeka maungwe, takati zveshe izvozvo ngazviende pashi peshona ngoti zvingawandisa mwashuma.
Honorable member, that's
Honorable Pachila.
What's the name again?
Pachila.
Yes, Honorable Bajila. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank the Portfolio Committee, the joint committees that have brought this report. And I think it brings us to a very important point that we need to engage in as a nation. The first question that we always need to ask ourselves is, as we move forward as a people, which parts of our past are we going with, and which parts of our past are we leaving behind? The first issue we need to accept is that when colonialists needed to find means of communicating and controlling us at some point, specifically in 1923, Professor Clement Dock was hired by the Witwatersrand University in South Africa to standardize languages on this side of the Limpopo. Those who have read Professor Clement Dock's report will understand his report on which is titled The Standardization of Shona Dialect, which earlier speakers have made reference to. But in listening to the report that was ably presented by Honorable Zobo and supported by Honorable Shiriedenga, I think that the committees needed to have gone further than what they've done. For example, both Honorable Shiriedenga and Honorable Zobo continue to mention Ndau as both a separate language and as a dialect. The failure to put it in one category shows us that we have a lot of work to do. Because they continue to say Ndau is one of the dialects of Shona, and proceeded to say Ndau is also recognized separately as a language. And these two cannot both be correct. And where it gets important, Mr. Speaker, and this is why I thought that the committee would have gone, was that it needed to give guidance to the ministry, need to give guidance to this house in terms of how are you going to define a language, how are you going to define a language cluster, how are you going to define dialects, so that we have clarity around these issues. We need not necessarily look at this issue from the angle of saying how many official languages do we need to have as a country. It's not a question that is constructive. It's not a question that is about bringing us together. But what we need to do is to seek to help respond to everyone in Zimbabwe to issues that Honorable Mnangagwa spoke to. Somebody cannot leave their home saying, this is the language that I speak. When they get to school, they are told, we are teaching your language at this school. But the things that they speak at home are not the things that are taught at school, but it is said to be the same language. It cannot be. So these are the questions that as we attend to this issue, we need to be asking ourselves, how best can we do this? One of the issues that give rise to this issue have been mentioned even by the Chief Whip himself earlier on. The very fact that what is examinable at school is examinable as Shona is predominantly two dialects. And the best thing we could do is to think around improving the kore content in examinable Shona. Improve the other contents in examinable Shona, so that as much as possible, the fact that kore is part of Chishona does not remain the things that we talk about, but it must be so even in practical terms. Because indeed, we have kore speaking people in Zimbabwe. We have people who, when they are at home, there is a language that they speak. When they get to school, that language is not there. And they are disenfranchised. The fight for recognizing the 16 languages that we now have emanated from exactly that issue, where people were saying, we go to school, we go to government areas, and we are told that we belong here, we are people of this country, but our languages do not express themselves that much. So, Mr. Speaker, in summary, what I pray that the committee should have done was to say, how best can we improve the kore content in examinable Chishona? Because we agree, we all can see it, that at the present moment, the kore content in examinable Chishona, in publicly used Chishona, is too little. But we still continue to say Chikore is part of our languages. The recognition of Chikore does not necessarily mean that we put it separately as a language on its own. But it must be part of what we do, what we say, how we speak as a people, because the Kore speaking people are part of us. They are Zimbabweans like all of us. These other languages, efforts were made to increase the content of those dialects in what is publicly known as Xhosa. And today, there is no complaint much about those languages. So in my view, we need to improve the recognition of kore as a language by improving its content in examinable Chishona. I thank you.
Honorable Gaetano.
Maita Mbate Chigaro. Nyaya irikureketiwa muno inyaya yakati dzikei inobata upenyu hwevanhu. Pandasimuka Honorable Mnangagwa wadaidzira kuti mabuja matoko wangahwe wese wanobuda mutauro wechikorekoro uyu tiri wabodziwo. Tikatanda kutaura chokwedu mudare muno vanhu vese vanopoirirwa, paribe anozvinzwaba. Munotoita useza hwakanaka pakuti takazofundisiwa chizezuru, tinozopedzesera taakutaura chizezuru kuti timbwike, asi tikatanda kureteka chokwedu chaicho muno tese tinopoirirwa, paribe anozvinzwaba zvatiri tichireketazvo. Saka muno tiri toboneresiwa chizvikuru pakuti tinenge tiri kumanikidziwa, kuretekesiwa zvisiri zveduba. Ndichikura inini kuchikoro, kunyanyanyanya kubva kucreche kusvika kugrade 7, tsumo dzataizonyora kushona taindonyora zvinhu zvatisingaziveba, zvatakamanikidziwa kudzidzisiwa tisingazvizviyeba, nokuti hwanga huri urimi hwamai hweduba. Pane tsumo yaiti wabaya dede nemukamwa, dede chi? Kwedu kuribe dede ba, kwedu kunopfene. Saka ndakasvika pakukura ndisingatomboinzwisise matsumo yokuti wabaya dede nemukanwa zvinoreiwei. Chokwadi kuti idi chimbwodoba kuno ari kureketa kuti tingatadze kutora chikorekore kuchiti chiwe mutauro wakazvimiririra. Ndinofunga kuti inyaya yatinoda kuti uongororei yatisingagone kundotaya matairo airi kuitiwa izvo zvino komiti yejustice, kundotaya zvinenge zviriba kudaisa nzero dzomunhu panyaya.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Point of order, Madam Speaker.
What's your point of order, Honorable?
Ndinotenda, Madam Speaker. Ndiri kuti mutauri ari kutaura zvakanaka, taikumbira kuti tizowana translator, toda kunyatsoteerera tione zviri kufamba sei. Toda kutenda bato chigaro.
Mbato yechigaro. Point of order iri kutotaura kuti chikorekore chishona ba ndosaka zvikumbwika apa. Ndizvo zviri kutoratidza kuti tikati chikorekore chimutauro chakazvimiririra nokuti ari kutoda anoturikira kuti azvimbwike zvatiri kureketa munozi. Ndosaka tiri kutoti ngachimire chega chakazvimirira nokuti chikorekore cho ndicho chinomabuja mukatimo, ndicho chinomangahwe ndiri mungahwe. Saka nana hasa pakuti takafundisiwa chizezuru mukatinzwa tichitaura, asi ndikandodzoka constituency izvo motonza kana kaurimi kangu kakutoti roko 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 ndakutaura chokumusha kwedu kunolira pfene. Saka ndaikumbira hangu kuti dai tagara pasi taonesana nyaya iyi toiongorora, tirege kundoitaya mataira yaitiwa nekomiti yejustice maita henyu mubato wechigaro.
Tinotenda Honorable. Honorable Nyabani, you can take the floor.
Maita basi. Inini ndiri mukorekore adozara. Kana tiri kwedu zvatauti kutaura tauti kunyaira. Regai ndinyaire zvanyaya wapana nabe yangu. Chikorekore watu wakorekore hauzi mutauro. Irudzi rudziro riri rinowanikwa kunana Zambezi kumusoro kwedu kunana Dharo kunana Zambezi hauzi mutauro ba. Vanhu vanofunga kuti mutauro mbarhu makorekore yedi. So isusu makorekore isu kana tichitonyaira isusu pano tichinyaira vanhu vanenge vachitoseka kuti vakunyaira chiki vanhuowa nokuti zvimwe zvacho zvatonyaira hazvinzivisisike mushe. So nokuti kuya kwatakazoita kuno kuparliament kunoku takafanira kuti zvakafanana nechirungu onjiti nokuti kukutaura chirungu saka vamurungu ichi kati kuti chishona ichi kuti chishona irudzi here mutauro here chii vanhu here. So taifungidzira kuti chikorekore chakabva muchikaranga nechikorekore ndo vanhu vamwe chete pamunhu mutapa. Kana takaenda kuhistory yedu chikaranga nechikorekore ndo vanhu 2 vanenge vachitaura pamunhu mutapa. So ndaifungidzira kuti zvinyatsoita mushe kuti zvinyatsotikwedere zvakanaka zvaifanira kunyatsoongororwa kuti chikorekore haizi zvakaita kuti mutauro chikorekore haizi mutauro vanhu rudzi. So ndaifungidzira kuti chikorekore ichi chinobata kubva kuchinjire mukota uku nomudhari wenu nokunana rushinga uku kusvikira futi kunana Kaliba makorekore ega ega eso yakusvika kunana Mazekwe kwese makorekore ega ega. So ndaifungidzira kuti dai manyatsoongorora kunyatsopatarisisa kunyatsoongorora kunyatsotarisa kuona kuti tingabva tataira futi here mutauro wokurasira futi kutaira futi kuti taye tsve kutukutu nokuti tauti mutauro nokuti havasi vanhu zvimwe zvachona taakutadza kunyatsotaura chikorekore chachona nokuda kuti izvo takamanikidziwa vanotaura panapa na honorable Kaitano kunzi aiwa zvokuti wazhinji watonyora kunyora bvunzo yakutaura kuti shona iyayo vachinzi vari kufoira kwedu kumakorekoro kwaitiigoniba nokuti itodzidziswa zvati zvisiri zvedu kutotanga tonzi a e i o i a e i o u iyoyo. So ndaifungidza kuti vejustice vaiva ntungamiririrwa navazvopo waye uyi chikorekore ichi haiuzi mutauroba mutauro unotaurwa nechi nerudzi rwechikorekore hauzi mutauro chete chete ba mutauro unotaurwa nerudzi rwechikorekore. So ndaifungidza kuti dai manyatsogara mambozvipa nguva monyatsolingitsitsa kulingitsa kwati kutarisa molingitsa kuti kunyaira kwatikuita kudochi kunyaira nekutaura zvakafanana here moonawo kana mazozvionawo kuti regai tivasiye varambo vachitaura shona hatigoni kuzviramba gozi zvataurawo nevazhinji kuendawo ikoko asi dai mazvionawo kuti chikorekore ichi kukumbira kwavo kwaita vanhu vatoonawo kuti at least president akati hapana fana kusara kunze hapana dinofana kusara kunze ikoko kuchikorekore kwanga kwasara mashuri totai kuzo dai mazvilingisa futi nokuzviongorora kuti dai chikorekore chatova mutauro. Ndatenda.
Totenda Honorable Nyabani. You can take the floor, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to add my voice to this.
It's Honorable
Murumbeti. Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm rising this afternoon to support the petition from the Dande Conversation Heritage, calling for the recognition of the Kore language, which is spoken by over 1 million people, Madam Speaker, in this country, as an official language of Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, this is not just a linguistic matter, it is a question of dignity, it is a question of justice, and a question of correcting historical wrongs. Madam Speaker, our Constitution obliges us under Section 16 to promote and preserve cultural values and practices that enhance dignity, well-being, and equality. Section 6, Madam Speaker, lists the official languages, but it is not immutable. It is a living framework that must evolve to reflect the lived realities of our people. Madam Speaker, the petitioners here are not asking for privilege. They are asking for inclusion. They are asking Parliament to honor the spirit of the Constitution by ensuring that no community feels invisible within its supreme law. Madam Speaker, the committees have argued that Kore is a dialect of Shona. Yet, other languages also considered a dialect of Shona are recognized separately in the Constitution. Why then should Kore be denied the same dignity? Madam Speaker, Kore is spoken across Mashonaland Central, Mashonaland West, and parts of northern Zimbabwe. It carries unique idioms, oral traditions, cultural expressions that cannot simply be subsumed under Shona. To dismiss Kore as a mere dialect is to erase the lived reality of its speakers. Madam Speaker, this petition before us forces Zimbabwe to confront a profound national question. How do we balance the preservation of our rich cultural and linguistic diversity with the imperative of constitutional clarity and national duty? Madam Speaker, this is not simply about Kore alone. It is about whether our supreme law can evolve to reflect the lived realities and identities of all people, or whether it will continue to carry the colonial classifications that grouped distinct tongues under broad labels. If we are to speak about unity, Madam Speaker, unity is built on recognition rather than erasure. Then the recognition of Kore, Madam Speaker, becomes a test case of our nation's commitment to inclusivity. Do we choose a path that honors every community's dignity, or do we risk perpetuating exclusion in the name of simplicity? Madam Speaker, this is the national question that demands our collective wisdom. For in answering it, we define not only the place of Kore, but the very character of Zimbabwe as a nation that neither celebrates or suppresses its diversity. Madam Speaker, I just want to speak on colonial legacies. We cannot ignore the shadow of colonial legacies in this debate. Madam Speaker, the colonial administration deliberately imposed linguistic hierarchies, elevating certain tongues while relegating others to invisibility. Kore, like many indigenous languages, was subsumed under the broader label of Shona as part of a strategy of simplification and control. This was not a neutral act, Madam Speaker. It was a political tool designed to erase distinctions, diminish identities, and weaken our communities. Madam Speaker, by denying Kore its rightful recognition today, we risk perpetuating those colonial injustices. True decolonization, Madam Speaker, requires us to dismantle these inherited hierarchies and affirm the dignity of every language, community, and community. Madam Speaker, recognizing Kore as an official language is not merely an administrative adjustment, it is a bold act of historical injustice, a declaration that Zimbabwe will no longer allow colonial classifications to define who we are or whose voices matter. Madam Speaker, we must confront these colonial legacies that shaped our linguistic landscape. Colonial administrators, Madam Speaker, acted in such a manner that imposed these hierarchies that fractured our communities. Madam Speaker, some may argue that recognizing Kore will fragment unity. I would like to argue the opposite. True unity, Madam Speaker, is built on recognition, not erasure. When communities see their language enshrined in the Constitution, they feel valued, they feel respected. Exclusion breeds resentment, Madam Speaker. Inclusion fosters loyalty. Madam Speaker, recognizing Kore strengthens our unity by ensuring that every Zimbabwean sees themselves reflected in the supreme law of the land. I would like to jump on to our international obligations, Madam Speaker, which speaks to this. Madam Speaker, Zimbabwe is a proud member of the United Nations and a signatory to conventions that protect indigenous people. Article 14 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People affirms the right to education in one's own language. The ILO Convention 169 recognizes the rights of indigenous communities to preserve and develop their languages. By recognizing Kore, Madam Speaker, we do not merely comply with international obligations, but we demonstrate leadership in protecting linguistic diversity. Madam Speaker, I want to jump on to my conclusion. This petition is not about fragmenting Zimbabwe. It is about weaving every thread of our cultural fabric into the national tapestry. Kore Kore is not a dialect to be hidden under Shona. It is a proud language of a proud people. By recognizing Kore Kore, Madam Speaker, we correct the colonial injustices that I spoke about. We fulfill our constitutional duty. We honor our international commitments and strengthen our unity through inclusion. I therefore, Madam Speaker, urge this House to look closely on this matter so that we come together and recognize Kore Kore as an official language. I so submit.
Order, Honorable Sohukanya. I now call upon Honorable Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, good afternoon. I move that the debate now adjourn.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Okay, who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
Okay, thank you. I put that the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the debate is adjourned. To what date, Honorable?
To tomorrow, Madam Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, I move that we revert back to order number 1 on today's order paper.
Order number 1. Who seconds?
Seconded, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Order number 1. On second reading of the Biological and Toxic Weapons Crime Bill, Minister of Defense.
Adjourn debate on motion on the second reading of the Biological and Toxic Weapons Crimes Bill, HB 9, 2025.
I now call upon Honorable Chinyabani.
Maita basa mbatu wesigani. Egaendi kutaula mashoma na uno yakataula sana. Tikada utarisa nyaya yezvino yezvinhu zvezvigadzirwa zviri kugadzirwa munyika. Panofana kunge pane mutemo wakanyatsoti simbarari. Takamboya muno tichitaura nenhau yezvinodhaka zvakafanana nemutoriro, zvakafanana nenyana guka, zvakafanana nezvakawanda zvinenge zvidhaka vanhu. Nekuda kwemutemo yedu isina kusimba, tiri kuona kuti zvinhu izvozvo zvinoramba zvichingoyefamba zvichingoyenda. Tinoona kuti nyika inopedzisira yakuparara. So ndiri kutaura kuti dai mutemo uda kuiswa unge mutemo unge wakasimba kuitira kuti zvinhu zviri kuitika izvozvizvi zvinge zvichibva zvasvika pamagumo kuti kufamba kwezvinhu zvinoita muhurumende zvinge zvichifamba zvine mutemo, nokuti tinogona kuti taisa imwe mitemo yatiri kuisa tobva tasiya buri ndifunza kuti kuchengetedza vanhu, asi mitemo yataisa iri kuchucha futi nekunyanya kusimba zvakanaka-naka. Ndichipa mufananidzo weSI yakaiswa nehurumende nokuti vanhu vanofanira kunge vachisungwa vari kutengesa zvinodhaka. Asi tikada kutarisa pamutemo yakaiswa nehurumende iyoyo, tiri kuona kuti zvinhu izvozvo vanhu vakabatwa vakaenda kukoti, vanhu vakubuda discharge vachinzi izvo hakuna mutemo wakadaro. Tine tiri kutopedza ndakambosumudza gore riya tuya $4, $4, $5 40% alcohol. Tichiri kutenderera munyika, vanhu vari kuparara notutidoretoto, vanhu vari kuparara nemasabhusenzi zvinodhaka. So yanga iri shwiro yangu yekuti dai zvatiri kuita muno mizvi aiwa zviriko biological kufutika biological zviri kubva kunze uku, bhozi vanhu vari kuisa zviri kubatanidza zvese izvozvo. Dai taisa mutemo wekuti kana tichibata zvana biological, bhozi biological tida kutarisa biological, pane biological warfare tichibatanidza zvinodhaka izvo. Bhozi biological weapon hachisi chombo chete ba, pane ino yatoti biological warfare tichibatanidza hwaitoto. So tikada kuisa mutemo unonanga zvinhu zvimwe chete tichisiya zvese kana tinoramba tichidzokerwa mashure. Saka ndaifungidzira kuti zvinhu zvatikisa mutemo yatikisa iyi ngatisiye taonawo futi kuti vanhu vari kubva kunana Mozambique, vanhu vazhinji vomuZimbabwe vari kupara mhosva nenyaya idzo dzatiri kutaura nezvemuno, bhozi vari muZimbabwe vanonzwisa mutemo. Vanhu vari kubva kunze kwenyika tikatarisa zvakutaura zvana doro, zvana tumbwa, zvana zvemabiological zvese zvatitaura izvezvi, zvinhu zviri kuuya nevanhu vauyi. Tikatarisa kuti vari kubika doro havasi vanhu muZimbabwe ka, vanhu vari kunana India ndo vari kubika doro irori. Tiri kuya tichiita maindastry, but ngatichazoonai kuti kana munhu achiita tichipa rezinesi, tikupa rezinesi kusvika palevel ipi. Bhozi marezinesi atiri kungopa tisanyatsotarisa kuti rezinesi atikupa iyi ndozvo zvacho zvinozoya zvine mabiological weapons atikuda kuisa ipapa. Saka ngatinyatsoongororei marezinesi atiri kuita kuti kana tichipa rezinesi harizi pachirungu kuti harina conflict here nemutemo imwe yatinenge tichipasisa kuno parliament. So ndiri kutaura panapa minista ndakada ndichidaro kuti urongwa hwamayana biological weapons zvakanaka zvikuru, because tikada kutarisa kunana kudzimwe nyika dzakatikomberedza kune zvinhu zvakawanda zviri kuitika ikoko zvinoafekta kuno kuZimbabwe kwedu, kunyika yedu yeZimbabwe. So changa chiri chikumbiro changu chokuti kana tichiisa mitemo iyoyo ngatiisei mitemo yese inobva yabatanidza kune vanhu vanouya nevanhu vanogara muno, because tinozoona kuti pane vamwe kuti kana auya apara mhosva muno tozomuti ngaachiende kotongwa kunyika kwake iye aparira mhosva muno. Kana kuti munhu apara mhosva muno wozowana leseni kuti kutonga kune kuri kudiki nokuti tita kutarisa kuti munhu abva kushamwari zedu kunext door kana kuti abva kushamwari zedu kunzvimbo yakati. So kana taisa mutemo ngatiisei mutemo unobata munhu wese, mupfupi, murefu, mutsvuku, akaita sei. So Madam Speaker ma'am, yanga iri kurudziro yangu yokuti nyaya yauya naminista iyi yauya panguva yakanaka, nokuti tikada kutarisa kuti tekinoloji hataanayo, zvombo zvakugadzirwa magadzirwo akasiyana siyana. Vanhu vanogona kutadza kugadzira hari zviri zvombo, vanogona kutongouya nevhairasi. Ngazvionekwe zvinhu zvese zviri kugadzirwa zvese kuti zviri kupinda munyika muno, zvingave zvikafu, zvingave zvatino dziri hembe dziri ari madonation. Auya nehembe tinongoona hembe kunaka kwehembe ikoko, singazopa hembe kopa nechii. Saka ngative nemishini yazvino inotarisa chingave chikafu, inotarisa dzingave hembe zvipfeko, inotarisa zvingave zvii zvinonyatsotarisa kuti zvinhu zvatiri kushandisa kana zvatiri kuimporta kana zvatiri kuexporta zvinobori nechii kuita kuti dzivirire mhuri yedu. Ndofunga nomashoko iyayo ndingada kuti Madam Speaker mimi maida basa asi panyaya hombe yandasumukira pana yanga ndanyoresera inhawo yokuti handingatege kunyanyotarisa nyaya yekumaweapons yokuridza kuti popo. Ngatitariseiwo futi tumbwa itoto because itori futi hombe yekutouraya vanhu. So nezvoda kuti maita basa nokuti ndipa nguva yamandipa kuti nditaurewo mashoko yangu mashoma ndatenda.
Maita basa Honorable Nyabani, Honorable Murombedzi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to add my voice to this bill, and I would like to thank the Honorable Minister for bringing the bill to this House. Madam Speaker, Zimbabwe is a state party to the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention and the 1925 Geneva Protocol. Section 327, subsection 2, Madam Speaker, of our Constitution obliges us to domesticate these treaties. This bill, therefore, is not a luxury, Madam Speaker. It is a constitutional duty to protect our people and to uphold our international commitments. Ethical and public. Madam Speaker, during nationwide consultations, citizens spoke with one voice. Biological weapons pose an unparalleled threat to humanity. They spread uncontrollably, destabilize societies, and inflict mass casualties. Madam Speaker, unlike conventional arms, they leave scars on our environment and undermine global health security. Therefore, this bill, Madam Speaker, is not just about law, it is about ethics, it is about safeguarding humanity, and about building trust among nations. Madam Speaker, there are gaps that we must address, however. Honorable Speaker, the consultations and the committee report revealed serious omissions. Whistleblower protection, Madam Speaker. Without safeguards, insiders will remain silent where vigilance is needed most. Independent appeals tribunal licensing decisions cannot rest solely with the Secretary of Defense, Madam Speaker. Justice demands impartial review. There is also gender representation, Madam Speaker, where I saw there was a gap. Women are excluded from advisory and appeals structures. This contradicts our constitution and our commitments to equality. Then there's also an issue of disposal procedures, Madam Speaker. No framework exists for safe, secure, environmentally sound disposal of confiscated materials. Then there's also an issue, Madam Speaker, of decentralized information systems. Researchers and enterprises outside Harare face barriers to access, as well as search warrants, Madam Speaker. The bill lacks a balanced framework for agent inspections without prior judicial authorizations. Madam Speaker, I just want to go on to recommendations for refinement. Madam Speaker, in order to make this bill robust, we must, number one, enshrine whistleblower protection with confidentiality guarantees and incentives. We need to establish an independent appeals tribunal to ensure fairness and transparency. Then we need to speak to gender inclusivity in advisory and appeal structures. We need to provide clear disposal procedures aligned with international best practices, as well as decentralized information systems to empower rural researchers and enterprises. Madam Speaker, we also need to balance inspection powers with safeguards to protect rights while enabling swift enforcement. Madam Speaker, this bill is actually a landmark step, but if we pass it without some refinements, it risks being constitutionally incomplete and administratively weak. We need to legislate it not only to comply with our treaties, but to protect our people, uphold justice, as well as enable peaceful scientific progress. Therefore, I urge this House to adopt the committee's recommendations and deliver a law that is inclusive, transparent, as well as enforceable. Madam Speaker, I so submit.
Thank you, Honorable Mrombezi. I now call upon Honorable Minister Mchingori.
Madam Speaker, I rise to respond to the second reading debate on the Biological and Toxin Weapons Crimes Bill, HB 9, 2025. Allow me to thank honorable members who debated constructively in support of this bill. This was clearly a demonstration of the commitment this august House places in the protecting of our fauna and flora and our people from biological agents and toxins. The chairperson of the Joint Portfolio Committees on Defense, Home Affairs, Security Services, and War Veterans Affairs, Youth Empowerment, Development and Vocational Training, and the thematic on peace and security, Honorable Mawaneke, in his presentation, gave an expose on the processes undertaken to ensure that honorable members were capacitated and also familiarized with the biological and toxin weapon crime bill. This was ably followed by a nationwide public hearing across Zimbabwe's 10 provinces, during which written submissions from legal experts and civil society were presented. And during the process, diverse views of citizens from all geographical and social backgrounds were well captured so as to enrich this vital legislation. We commend the committee's adherence to Section 141 of the Constitution, which adopted a robust and multi-pronged consultation methodology. Lastly, to indicate that most of the committee's sweeping observations and recommendations were appreciated and will be accommodated during the committee stage. Allow me, Madam Speaker, to now address key submissions on specific issues that were raised in the report clause by clause, and I will address specific issues raised by honorable members. I'll start with clause 4 on offenses in relation to biological agents, toxins, or weapons. There were no issues. All honorable members were in support. On clause 5, responsible authority, no issues were raised. On clause 5, section 2, National Authority Advisory Committee. Madam Speaker, the recommendations to enlarge the National Authority Advisory Committee, taking into consideration health, agriculture, environment, academia, law enforcement, and civil society is justified. The proposals to align with the globally acclaimed One Health model, which is being pursued by the Second Republic and conforms with a multidisciplinary approach, will be observed. Madam Speaker, regarding gender representation in the National Advisory Committee and other honorable members, our Constitution dictates explicitly under Section 17 that a 50-50 gender balance across all appointed state institutions be observed. Clause 7, conditions of obtaining a license. There were no issues that were raised. And on clause 15, powers of inspectors. Madam Speaker, the suggestion that our biosecurity inspectors must be empowered to act swiftly without waiting for prior judicial authorization in extreme circumstances touches on a critical operational reality. A bureaucratic delay of just 2 hours to secure a warrant could result in an irreversible, catastrophic community outbreak or the permanent destruction of forensic evidence. Therefore, we accept the proposal to permit warrantless entries, but only under narrow, strictly predefined emergency circumstances where public health or national security is under imminent threat. However, Madam Speaker, we are equally mindful of our citizens' constitutional right to privacy. Accordingly, we are proposing embedding iconclad statutory safeguards. Firstly, warrantless searches are strictly barred from private residential dwellings, except on reasonable suspicion by an inspector that immediate harm to public safety will result. Unless such a search is made promptly to avoid such harm, in which case the inspector must, as soon as reasonably practicable, obtain a warrant from a court or justice of peace to enable the issuing authority to evaluate the agency after the event. Otherwise, warrantless search will apply only to commercial, industrial, or institutional labs. Secondly, an inspector who executes an emergency search is legally mandated to file a full written report and an exact inventory of seized items to the nearest magistrate within 48 hours. Finally, to ensure maximum accountability, it is proposed to insert in the bill, after clause 22, a standard immunity clause for inspectors and other officers of the authority. The effect of this will be to make it clear that legal immunity from civil or criminal liability does not extend to inspectors or officers who abuse their authority. Other issues which were raised, but not explicitly in the bill, on disposal of biological agents and toxins weapon on 6.1. Insertion of a new clause on disposal of confiscated materials. On the proposal to introduce a new clause on disposal of confiscated materials, we totally agree with the Joint Committee. There is need, therefore, for a clear procedure for the safe, secure, and environmentally sound disposal of confiscated biological and toxin materials, aligned with international best practices. Accordingly, my ministry will insert a new clause on the handling and disposal of confiscated biological agents and toxins. On 2, decentralization on information systems. Lastly, the Joint Committee recommended that we decentralize the information system to ensure accessibility, particularly for researchers, universities, and enterprises outside major urban centers. The proposal is valid and is in line with the requirements of Section 264 of our Constitution, which provides for the devolution of government functions and responsibilities. My ministry is proposing that this be provided for in the regulations to be made the minister in terms of clause 23 of the bill. The regulations will provide for the establishment, operationalization and maintenance of a secure electronic registry and network to be known as the Decentralized Biosecurity Information System, DBIS. The system will have provincial access points to serve researchers, academic institutions, and veterinary, agricultural, or medical laboratories located outside urban centers. Remote compliance capabilities will enable rural-based entities to submit regulatory filings, inventory updates, and license applications without traveling to Harare. The responsible authority will ensure that the DBIS features enable safe, interoperable data sharing interfaces with key line ministries, thus promoting a cohesive national biosecurity approach. On whistleblower protection, Madam Speaker, to address the pertinent recommendation made by the committee and other honorable members regarding the insertion of a specific clause to protect whistleblowers who report biological and toxin weapons crimes. While my ministry deeply appreciates the committee's vigilance in ensuring the safety of those who expose these high-level crimes, inserting a standalone whistleblower clause in this bill would result in legislative duplication. Our government operates on the principle of legislative coherence. Whistleblower and witness protection in Zimbabwe will be centrally governed by the proposed Whistleblowers and Witness Protection Act. This specialized act will provide a comprehensive framework that shields all public interest whistleblowers from threats, from harm or occupational detriment. To maintain statutory alignment and avoid fragmented legislation, my ministry is proposing including a definitive cross-reference in the bill. This will ensure that any individual reporting biological crimes is explicitly directed to the robust protections to be offered under the primary whistleblowers law. 4, on independent appeals tribunal. Madam Speaker, the proposal to establish an appeals institution. My ministry accepts the committee's progressive proposal to establish a structured mechanism for individuals or entities to appeal against the decisions of the responsible authority. A robust, fair, and transparent licensing process is vital for legitimate scientific and industrial research, and there must be an accessible avenue for administrative justice when an applicant feels aggrieved. However, from a legislative drafting perspective, my ministry is of the view that the term independent appeals tribunal is inappropriate nomenclature. In Zimbabwe, tribunals are highly specialized, semi-permanent judicial or quasi-judicial bodies. Introducing a new standalone tribunal under this bill would create a jurisdictional overlap and structural conflict with the Administrative Court of Zimbabwe, which holds overarching statutory jurisdiction over miscellaneous administrative appeals. Therefore, to maintain consistency with standard Zimbabwean legislative drafting, my ministry proposes that we substitute independent appeals tribunal with the Biological and Toxin Weapons Licensing Appeals Board. This appeals board will serve as the first instance of specialized administrative review. If an applicant is dissatisfied with the determination of this board, they will retain their constitutional right to appeal further to the Administrative Court in terms of the Administrative Court Act, Chapter 7, Section 1. This ensures a streamlined, legally sound process that respects the existing architecture of our justice system. Madam Speaker, I now proceed to the debate by honorable members. I want to thank Honorable Madziwanyika for opening the debate and providing an elaborate situational analysis in support of this bill. We also thank Honorable Marshal Wawe for voicing his support for this bill and the Joint Committee's findings. He particularly endorsed Clause 5, which identifies the Secretary for Defense as the responsible authority. Honorable Mapiki also rose to support the bill, bringing up the issue of passive biological warfare. In the same vein, we thank Honorable Chilua for supporting the bill. He emphasized the bill's constitutionality, zero tolerance for biological terrorism and weapons proliferation, and he commended the automatic registration of entities already registered under Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe and licensed under this act. We are also grateful to Honorable Kaitano for adding his voice in support of the bill, highlighting its consistency with modern-day security architecture. We also thank Honorable Danzi for adding a voice in support of the bill, highlighting that the bill will safeguard the health and security of the people of Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, allow me to address the concerns raised by honorable members. Honorable Madziwanyika proposed that the bill include a schedule of controlled biological agents for the benefit of the public. Madam Speaker, my ministry agrees with the suggestion from the honorable member. However, the list is part of the regulations to be issued out by the minister in terms of Clause 23 and cannot be accommodated in the bill. Zimbabwe is currently domesticating the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, high consequences agents and toxins framework, and developing the national management guidelines of the HCAT list, which commenced in September 2025. Currently, what is in place is a national preliminary priority HCAT list for humans, animals, and plants. The document is still work in progress and will be gazetted in terms of Clause 23 of the bill. Madam Speaker, Honorable Mapiki raised an emotional issue regarding the environmental degradation and critical water contamination caused by substances like mercury and cyanide in gold mining operations. My ministry shares the members' deep anxieties regarding the safety of our communal water bodies. However, Mr. Speaker, as a matter of rigorous legislative drafting, we must cleanly distinguish industrial chemical pollution from the scope of this specific bill. The Biological and Toxins Weapons Crimes Bill is purely to domesticate the United Nations Biological Weapons Convention by criminalizing the hostile use, cultivation, and stockpiling of deliberate biological pathogens and toxins. Conversely, mercury and cyanide are industrial chemical agents. Their handling, licensing, and environmental tracking are already heavily policed by existing robust statutes, specifically the Environmental Management Act, Chapter 20, Section 27, via Statutory Instrument 268 of 2018, as well as the Mines and Minerals Act. Folding mining regulations into this bioweapons framework would create severe administrative overlap and legal confusion. I assure the honorable member that water contamination remains a high priority for government and must be addressed through the ongoing amendments to the Mines and Minerals Act and stricter enforcement by the Environmental Management Agency, EMA, rather than diluting this biosecurity law. Madam Speaker, I want to express my gratitude to the Honorable Member Mapiki for raising the vital issue regarding border security. The potential exploitation of our borders for the illicit movement of biological materials is a matter of paramount national security. I wish to provide total reassurance to this House that the transit movement of biological agents is already entirely prohibited under this bill. The preamble and core objectives are specifically drafted to criminalize and outlaw and unauthorized transit, transshipment, transportation, and transfer of restricted biological weapons or toxins through Zimbabwean territory. Any such movement constitutes a first-class felony. On the issue of smuggling, this bill is tightly focused on lethal nature of the biological agents or toxin. The physical act of border breaching falls squarely under the jurisdiction of the Customs and Excise Act, Chapter 23, Section 2. It is actively policed by ZIMRA and border law enforcement agencies. To resolve the members' concern, my ministry is proposing a compromise by inserting a consequential cross-referencing clause. This will ensure that the moment a customs official intercepts an illicit biological material under the Customs Act, it instantly triggers the heavy, severe criminal penalties outlined right here in this bill. Honorable Mapiki further suggested that inspectors be appointed on merit and with a modern skill set. My ministry fully agrees that appointments must be based on a transparent, competitive, and meritocratic process rather than administrative placement. Madam Speaker, Clause 14 of the bill provides that inspectors will be drawn almost exclusively from exiting agencies with the required expertise, such as the Environmental Management Agency and the Medicine Control Authority of Zimbabwe. A clause can be refined in the regulations to specify that the minister must appoint inspectors based on verified professional qualifications, regulatory experience, and a clean security clearance. Honorable Pinduka expressed similar sentiments with the Joint Committee on the need to expand the advisory committee to include universities and research institutions to benefit from their expertise. Madam Speaker, as alluded to earlier, the advisory committee will be expanded accordingly. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the august House for the unwavering support of this bill. I want also, before I conclude, to appreciate, I didn't quite get the name of the honorable member who raised an issue on drug and substance abuse, which does not include the issues which we are deliberating on at hand. I would suggest that tomorrow, during question time, I will be more than ready to address the issue. Madam Speaker, I'm aware that in realization of the challenges that he ably highlighted, government has constituted a committee to look into these serious issues, which does not observe a statutory instrument which was put in place to ensure that the drugs and substance items, Tumbra in particular, and many other such substances which were included in that statutory instrument, and that people continue to sell them openly. I want to assure this House that government is seized with the matter. A committee is put in place, and we are looking into those issues. I hope I have addressed that issue. The second member raised also the issues that were of concern to the committee, which she is a member of, and I did allude to most of the issues of whistleblowers, of also search warrants, and I hope I have adequately addressed the issues that were highlighted. I so submit, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Much appreciated. I put the question that the Biological and Toxic Weapons Crimes Bill, HB 9 2025, be now read a second time. Those of who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed, and the clerk will read the bill a second time.
Biological and Toxic Weapons Crimes Bill, HB 9 2025.
What the date for the second reading, Minister?
Thursday, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, I move that the debate do adjourn.
Sorry, Honorable Minister. What day for the committee?
On Thursday, Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that we revert back to order number 14 on today's order paper.
Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you. I'd like to table three very important Auditor General's reports. The first one is regarding state-owned enterprises and parastatals. It covers the year ending 31 December 2025. That's the first report. Thank you. The second report is again from the Auditor General's Office regarding local authorities, again for the year ended 31 December 2025. The third report, Madam Speaker, pertains to the appropriation accounts, finance and revenue statements, and statutory and retention funds for the year ended 31 December 2025. These are the three sets of auditor reports. If I could continue, I also want to table a set of treasury minutes. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I hereby present to this august House two treasury minutes in response to the public accounts PAC report presented in Parliament by the chair of the committee. This is for Air Zimbabwe, with the date ending 31 December 2022. And the second one is on Zimbabwe Revenue Authority, ZIMRA, for the period 31 up to 31 December 2021 and 2022. Madam Speaker, ma'am, Treasury is committed to addressing all observations raised by the Public Accounts Committee to strengthen internal control systems and to enhance transparency and accountability as enriched in the Constitution, as enshrined in the Constitution. I submit, Madam Speaker, ma'am, these two sets of Treasury minutes. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now call upon Honorable Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that all orders be stood over until order number 45 has been disposed of. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Notice of motion number 14, Honorable Malinganiso.
Speaker, ma'am, 45.
45.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said 14. Thank you. Seconds.
Seconded, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will read the 46th order of the day. 45.
Agenda debate on motion on the report of the Portfolio Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade on the 2025 first, second, and third quarter budget performance reports from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, SC7 2026.
It's motion number what? Chief Whip.
45, Madam Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Okay. When this debate was adjourned on the 28th April 2026, the question before the House was a motion by Honorable Shamu that this House considered and adopted the reports of the Portfolio Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade on the 2025 first, second, and the third quarter budget performance reports from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, SC7 2026. Is there any further debate? I call upon Honorable Shamu.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I rise to move for the adoption of the report of the Portfolio Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade on the first, second, and third quarter budget performance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. And thank you.
Who seconds?
Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Honorable
Mangondo.
I put the question that the motion be adopted. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the motion is adopted. Honorable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that we revert back to order number 14 and 15 in that order.
Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
Okay. Notice of motion number 14, Honorable Mangaliso.
I move the motion in my name.
Who seconds?
I second.
The question before the House is a motion by Honorable Mangaliso that this House considers and adopts the report of the Joint Portfolio Committee on the Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare and Thematic Committee on Human Rights on a petition from the Power of Touch institution Okay, thank you, ma'am. I call upon Honorable Mangaliso to move his own motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Madam Speaker, according to Section 149 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, read together with Appendix E of the Standing Orders of the National Assembly on petitions, every citizen and permanent resident of Zimbabwe has a right to petition Parliament to consider any matter within its authority, including the enactment, amendment, or repeal of legislation. On 15 August 2025, Parliament received a petition from the Power of Touch institution represented by Mr. Francis Dembetembe and Ms. Beatrice Sitole, requesting Parliament to review laws and regulations that have a bearing on senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. The petition was examined for compliance and found to be admissible and was subsequently referred to the Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare. Given that the matters raised directly implicated the rights, dignity, and welfare of older persons, the committee considered the petition jointly with the Thematic Committee on Human Rights. The petition raised issues of law, policy, administration, and public service delivery affecting older persons in Zimbabwe. In particular, it pointed to the fragmentation of the legal framework governing older persons, the inadequacy of social protection programs, the absence of dedicated institutional arrangements for implementation and monitoring of the same, and the limited recognition of the social and economic contribution of senior citizens and retired professionals. The petitioner's prayer. The petitioners beseeched Parliament to take legislative and oversight measures to improve the conditions of senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals in Zimbabwe. Their principal prayer was that Parliament should cause an urgent review of all laws and regulations bearing on older persons and facilitate the enactment of a new and comprehensive Senior Citizens, Pensioners, and Retired Professionals Act. Specifically, the petitioners requested Parliament to consider the following measures: commission an urgent review of all laws, regulations, and socio-economic conditions affecting senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals, with a view to adopting a multi-stakeholder approach to reform. Cause the enactment of a new and comprehensive Senior Citizens, Pensioners, and Retired Professionals Act that consolidates and harmonizes the rights, protections, and benefits of older persons. In specific terms, the laws should provide for the following: define an older person or a senior citizen to include every Zimbabwean aged 55 years and above. Establish a department in the relevant ministry headed by a director to ensure the implementation and monitoring of the proposed legal framework, supported by adequate budgetary and human resources. Decentralize the office of all provinces and ensure that decentralize this office to all provinces and ensure that major public service points such as hospitals, clinics, banks, ports of entry, supermarkets, hotels, polling stations, and educational institutions have properly manned older persons conduct tests. Require publication of comprehensive quarterly reports on the economic, social, and political status of senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. Ensure that public broadcasters and taxpayer-funded media adequately cover issues affecting senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. Introduce unconditional and predetermined social welfare grants adjusted for inflation and reflective of the cost of living, and ensure that pensions and related benefits are indexed to the Consumer Price Index. Guarantee free access by senior citizens to public and private medical institutions of their choice, and ensure the maintenance of functional geriatric wards. Enhance budgetary allocations to the Older Persons Fund and relax capital expenditure limitations in order to mitigate the hardships faced by older persons. Waive selected statutory and public service fees for senior citizens, including municipal rates, parking, birth and death certificate fees, conveyancing, capital gains, and passport application fees. Establish inspection mechanisms for public and private old people's homes and provide relief to older persons supporting unemployed, orphaned, or single parent dependents. Methodology. In conducting its inquiry, the Joint Committee considered the petition as lodged by the Power of Touch institution, including its admissibility, records, and annexes. The committee also had oral evidence on 23 February 2026 from the petitioners and from the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare. The oral evidence session enabled the committees to appreciate, on the one hand, the lived experiences and proposals advanced by the petitioners, and on the other hand, the policy, legal and administrative measures already in place or under development within government. The committees further utilized the petition itself, the oral submissions, and the applicable constitutional and statutory framework in arriving at their findings. I turn to findings. Nature of the grievances raised by the petitioners. The petitioners submitted that there is widespread hardship among older persons in Zimbabwe, manifesting in poverty, inadequate income security, constrained access to health services, loss of dignity at public service points, and weak institutional protection. The petitioners argued that although various statutes and policies touch on older persons, the current framework is fragmented and insufficiently coordinated. In their view, this fragmentation makes implementation difficult and weakens accountability. The petitioners further emphasized that older persons were not a homogeneous category. Some were pensioners, retired professionals, and others were simply senior citizens who may have spent most of their lives in informal, peasant, or communal livelihoods and therefore do not benefit from formal pension schemes. The committees found this distinction useful because it illustrates the breadth of the social protection challenge and the need for responses that go beyond formal pensions only. Need for a more coherent legal framework. A central theme of the petition was the call for one comprehensive law dealing with senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. The petitioners argued that existing laws use different terms such as older persons, elderly, and pensioners, and that the lack of legal and administrative coherence creates ambiguity regarding coverage, implementation, and monitoring. Mr. Tizimunga, the Social Protection Acting Chief Director from the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, advised the Joint Committee that the Constitution already contains provisions on the rights of the elderly and that the Older Persons Act, Chapter 1711, the Social Welfare Assistance Act, Chapter 1706, the National Social Protection Policy Framework, and the National Development Strategy 2 all provide a basis for interventions concerning older persons. The ministry further submitted that it was already in the process of reviewing the Older Persons Act, reviewing the Social Welfare Assistance Act into a broader Social Protection Act, and formulating an older persons policy. While noting those ongoing processes, the Joint Committee found merit in the petitioner's concern that the current framework remains dispersed across different statutes and policies. In the definition of older person and age thresholds, the petitioners proposed that an older person or senior citizen be defined as any Zimbabwean aged 55 years and above. Their argument was informed by the socio-economic realities of aging in Zimbabwe, including diminished earning capacity, dependence burdens, poor access to health services, and the vulnerability of many persons approaching or entering retirement. Mr. Tizimunga, however, advised that the Constitution refers to persons over the age of 70 years in relation to specified rights, while the Older Persons Act currently identifies an older person as one aged 65 years and above. The ministry also indicated that the retirement age in the public service has been reviewed upwards, and that changing the age threshold across the board may require wider legal reform and constitutional alignment. The committees found that the age issue remains contested and requires careful policy and legal consideration. However, the evidence received clearly pointed to the need for a more explicit and operationally useful definition, including differentiation between senior citizens generally, pensioners, and retired professionals where appropriate. Institutional arrangements for implementation.
The petitioners proposed the creation of a dedicated department headed by a director to oversee the welfare and development of senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. They argued that without a clearly identifiable institutional focal point, older persons' issues are treated as peripheral matters and are often addressed only in theory rather than in practice. In response, Mr. Munga stated that responsibility for older persons currently lies within the Department of Social Development and that there is an older persons body provided for under the law. The ministry also indicated that older persons programs are decentralized across provinces and administrative districts, and that there is a section dealing specifically with older persons under the Department of Social Development. Notwithstanding those arrangements, the ministry acknowledged resource constraints and indicated that government has not yet appointed a substantive director solely responsible for older persons. The joint committees found that this admission was significant. It demonstrates that although there is some institutional architecture in place, the petitioners' concern about visibility, coordination, and implementation capacity was not without foundation. I turn, Madam Speaker, to social protection and income security. A major grievance raised by the petitioners related to the precarious financial position of older persons. The petitioners called for unconditional and inflation-adjusted social welfare grants, as well as improved pension and benefit indexation. They submitted that many older persons, including those who were once professionals or public servants, now live in destitution and were unable to meet basic needs. Mr. Zimunga informed the joint committees that the Older Persons Fund was operational and that older persons may benefit from several social protection interventions, including per capita grants for those under institutional care, food deficit mitigation, cash transfers, health assistance, and support through the basic education assistance module for dependents. The ministry also advised that government was considering a universal grant scheme subject to fiscal space and the strengthening of the social registry. The committees found that while social protection measures do exist, they were neither universal nor yet sufficient to meet the scale of vulnerability described by the petitioners. The committees also observed that inflation, currency instability, and the cost of health care continue to erode whatever limited assistance is available to many older persons. I turn, Madam Speaker, to access to health care. The petitioners submitted that many senior citizens fail to access free or affordable health care in practice, notwithstanding policy statements or statutory guarantees. They raised concern over hospital charges, the cost of medication, and the absence of adequately functioning geriatric services. The evidence highlighted the emotional and financial distress borne by families caring for elderly relatives. Mr. Zimunga advised that persons above 65 years may access free treatment through the assisted medical treatment order issued in districts. It also indicated that government, through the Ministry of Health and Childcare, was working towards a national health insurance scheme that may broaden access to treatment for older persons. The joint committees found a clear gap between legal entitlement or policy aspirations and the lived reality recounted by petitioners. Even where a scheme exists, inadequate awareness, limited fiscal support, administrative bottlenecks, and pressures within public health institutions can undermine effective access. I turn, Madam Speaker, to public service delivery, dignity, and prioritization. The petitioners repeatedly underscored the issue of dignity. The petitioners argued that older persons often experience disrespect, poor handling, and a lack of priority treatment at public points such as hospitals, banks, supermarkets, and other service centers. They proposed older persons contact desks and more deliberate accommodation of older persons across the public service delivery chain. Mr. Zimunga submitted that there was already a standing expectation among service providers that older persons should not queue, and that government is engaging local authorities on discounts and exemptions on selected local authority services for older persons. However, the petitioner's oral evidence suggested that the practical observance of such arrangements remains uneven. The committees found that the issue was not merely one of moral rules, but of enforceability, awareness, training, and service culture. There is need for public institutions and private service providers alike to adopt more visible and standardized arrangements that preserve the dignity of older persons and improve access to services. I turn, Madam Speaker, to older persons as caregivers and bearers of dependence burdens. The petitioners drew attention of the committees to the reality that many older persons were not only vulnerable in their own right, but also carry the burden of supporting unemployed children, grandchildren, orphans, and single-parent dependents. In both urban and rural communities, older persons are often the final safety net for struggling households. The ministry acknowledged this challenge and noted that migration, unemployment, and other social pressures have left many older persons caring for dependents with inadequate resources. The Joint Committee found that this intergenerational dependence deepens the vulnerability of older persons and should be expressly reflected in social protection design, targeting, and budgeting. I turn, Madam Speaker, to recognition of retired professionals and social value of older persons. The petitioners also approached the matter from the perspective of national development, arguing that retired professionals and older persons represent a reservoir of experience, wisdom, and institutional memory that should not be ignored. They proposed greater recognition and deliberate inclusion of senior citizens in advisory, governance, and community structures. Then on standards in old people's homes and public accountability, the petitioners requested stronger inspection and oversight of public and private old people's homes to ensure world-class standards of care. In response, the ministry advised that residential care facilities are presently largely privately owned and that standards for such facilities are being developed. I turn, Madam Speaker, to the committee's observations. The Joint Committee observed that the petition by the Power of Church institution was properly conceived and raised matters of genuine public importance. The evidence laid before the Joint Committee showed that older persons face a multi-dimensional challenge encompassing legal uncertainty, weak institutional coordination, inadequate income security, constrained health access, and dignity deficits at service delivery points. The committee further observed that government had already initiated important policy and legislative review processes, particularly in relation to the Older Persons Act, the Social Welfare Assistance Act, and an Older Persons Policy. These are commendable steps. The Joint Committee noted that older persons were not a uniform category. Some are pensioners, some are retired professionals, and some are elderly citizens outside the formal pension economy. Any future legal and policy response must therefore be broad enough to cover these categories while still permitting targeted interventions where necessary. The committees also observed that the welfare of older persons should be approached both as a rights issue and as a matter of national social policy. Zimbabwe owes older persons not only care and protection, but also dignity, recognition, and inclusion. I turn, Madam Speaker, to the committee's recommendations. The Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare should expedite the review of the Older Persons Act and related social protection legislation so as to produce a coherent and enforceable framework for the protection of senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals by December 2026. Going forward, government should consider the feasibility of a consolidated legal framework relating to older persons. The Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare should strengthen the institutional focal point for older persons by formalizing a unit or directorate with adequate staffing and coordination functions at national and subnational levels by January 2027. Treasury should progressively increase budgetary support to the Older Persons Fund, the Assisted Medical Treatment Order, and other social protection interventions targeted at older persons, with a view to improving access to service and reducing vulnerability in the 2027 national budget. The Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, together with local authorities and relevant regulators, should develop standard service delivery guidelines on the treatment and prioritization of older persons at public service points, including hospitals, banks, transport hubs, and local authority offices by 31 December 2026. The Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare should progressively adjust pensions and social grants aligned to the Consumer Price Index and cost of living benchmarks, starting budgeting in the 2027 financial year. Treasury should comply with assisted medical treatment orders extended to older persons while expediting the National Health Insurance Scheme by providing adequate resources in the 2027 financial year. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, the committee concludes that the plight of senior citizens, pensioners and retired professionals in Zimbabwe is structural, systemic and urgent. Existing laws and policies, while well-intentioned, remain fragmented, weakly enforced and insufficient to guarantee dignity, security and social inclusion owing to lack of financial resources. The committee therefore strongly recommends the enactment of a comprehensive consolidated senior citizens, pensioners and retired professionals act supported by a powerful coordinating institution as the most viable and sustainable solution to ensure that every ministry, without exception, takes full account of the rights and needs of older persons. I so submit and I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The question before the House is a motion by Honorable Malinganiso that this House considers and adopts the report of the Joint Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare and the Thematic Committee on Human Rights on a petition from the Power of Touch institution on the review of laws and regulations that have a bearing on senior citizens and pensioners, SC 18 of 2026. Is there any debate? I call upon Honorable Pajila.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I rise to wholeheartedly support the report of the Joint Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare and the Thematic Committee on Human Rights regarding the petition by the Power of Touch Institute on the review of laws and regulations affecting senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. Madam Speaker, at the outset, I wish to commend both committees and the petitioners for bringing before this House an issue that speaks directly to the conscience of our nation. The measure of a society's conscience is not found merely in the size of its economy, but on how it treats those who have already given their productive years in service to the nation. Madam Speaker, Section 82 of our Constitution recognizes the rights of older persons and obliges the state to take reasonable measures to ensure their well-being. This report reminds us of that constitutional obligation and that the promises must be translated into practical realities. Madam Speaker, Zimbabwe's older citizens are not a burden. They are our yesteryear teachers, our nurses, our soldiers, our farmers, our entrepreneurs, our civil servants, our religious leaders, and even community builders to some extent. Many sacrificed their lives during the liberation struggle, and others built our country through sacrifices made post-independence. Today, many of them live in poverty. They struggle to access health care. They queue for hours to receive basic public services. That situation is inconsistent with the dignity guaranteed in Section 82 of our Constitution. The committees, therefore, correctly observe that our current legal framework is fragmented. The rights of older persons are scattered across various statutes, making implementation difficult and accountability very weak. I therefore fully support the recommendation that government expedite the review of the Older Persons Act while working towards a comprehensive and consolidated legal framework for senior citizens, pensioners, and retired professionals. Madam Speaker, this recommendation is consistent with international best practices from the Global South. In South Africa, the Older Persons Act provides a comprehensive legal framework protecting the rights of older persons while regulating residential care facilities and community-based services. In Brazil, the Statute of the Elderly guarantees priority health care, transport concessions, protection from abuse, and dedicated institutional mechanisms. In India, the Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act imposes legal obligations on families while empowering the state to establish welfare mechanisms and specialized tribunals. Closer to home, Namibia has maintained one of Africa's most universal social pensions, significantly reducing extreme poverty among older persons. These examples, Madam Speaker, demonstrate that comprehensive legislation backed by sustainable financing is both achievable and effective within developing countries. I equally support, Madam Speaker, the recommendation to strengthen institutional arrangements by establishing a properly resourced directorate responsible for older persons. Across the Global South, countries that have made progress have established clear institutional leadership responsible for older persons. For example, Brazil established national councils for older persons that coordinate implementation across sectors. South Africa similarly integrates services through dedicated social development structures working within provincial governments. Zimbabwe requires, therefore, an institution with adequate authority, personnel, and financial resources to coordinate policy, monitor implementation, and regularly report to this august House. Madam Speaker, the recommendation to strengthen the Older Persons Fund deserves our strongest support. One of the greatest challenges facing older persons is inflation. Pension values decline while the cost of medicines, food, and transport continues to rise. Countries such as Brazil and Uruguay regularly adjust pension benefits to preserve purchasing power. Similarly, Botswana and Namibia continue to expand social pension as instruments of poverty reduction. Zimbabwe should progressively move towards predictable pension adjustments linked to inflation and the consumer price index, exactly as recommended by the joint committees. Madam Speaker, healthcare deserves particular emphasis in this debate. The committees correctly note that although certain legal provisions exist, many elderly citizens still fail to access affordable treatment because of financial and administrative barriers. Countries such as Thailand have demonstrated that universal health coverage substantially improves healthcare access for older citizens. Rwanda has expanded community-based health insurance, enabling vulnerable populations, including older persons, to receive essential health care closer and closer to their communities. Zimbabwe's proposed national health insurance scheme presents an opportunity to ensure that no elderly citizen is denied health care because of inability to pay. Madam Speaker, I particularly welcome the Joint Committee's recommendation on dignity in public service delivery. It is recognition that age often comes with reduced mobility, chronic illness, and increased vulnerability. Across Asia, Latin America, and Southern Africa, dedicated queues, seating facilities, accessible infrastructure, and priority counters have become standard practice for the elderly citizens. Zimbabwe should institutionalize these simple but meaningful measures in hospitals, banks, government offices, transport terminals, and local authorities. Madam Speaker, the report also correctly recognizes that many older persons are caring for orphaned grandchildren and unemployed family members. This phenomenon is common across Southern Africa due to unemployment, migration, HIV and AIDS, and the ever-changing family structures. Our social protection policies must therefore support not only older persons themselves, but also the households dependent upon them. Madam Speaker, as Parliament considers the future legislation, I respectfully propose several additional measures for consideration. First, government should establish a national register of older persons to improve planning and targeting of social protection programs. Second, Parliament should consider introducing tax incentives for employers that re-engage retired professionals on mentorship programs, thereby preserving institutional memory. Most institutions are struggling to move forward because while it is necessary to take speedy steps moving forward, it is also important to preserve institutional memory. Therefore, there should be a program of promoting the retention of retired civil servants, retired professionals as consultants, so that institutional memories of certain growing organizations is retained. Thirdly, digital literacy programs should be introduced for senior citizens to enable them to access online banking, government services, and health information. Madam Speaker, a lot of issues, a lot of government services, a lot of public sector and private sector services are moving into online spaces, and without including this kind of information, this kind of education, this kind of services to senior citizens, we are leaving them behind. They are lacking, they are failing to access some of the things that are due to them. So it is important that in planning about our digital migration as different government departments and institutions, we include the interests of senior citizens and make sure that the digital migration that we are including, we are getting into, they are included into it. Finally, Parliament should require annual reporting on the implementation of policies affecting older persons so that oversight becomes continuous rather than occasional. Madam Speaker, the report before us is not merely about welfare. It is about justice. It is about recognizing that today's older persons built Zimbabwe we have inherited, and tomorrow's older persons are actually ourselves. By adopting these recommendations, Parliament will be investing not only in the well-being of today's elderly citizens, but also in the dignity and security of future generations. I therefore urge this august House to adopt this report in its entirety and to ensure that its recommendations are implemented without further delay. I so submit.
Thank you. Further debate. I recognize Deputy Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that the debate do now adjourn.
Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
It has been moved that the debate be now adjourned. Is there any debate? I put the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those who have that opinion say aye. Those of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed, and the debate is adjourned to what day?
To tomorrow, Madam Speaker.
The debate is adjourned to tomorrow.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that we proceed to order number 15 on today's order paper.
Who seconds?
Honorable Madam Chair. Madam Speaker.
What's your point of order?
Ndaona sokuti imba ina ichina kora Madam Speaker. Ndatenda.
Order. I direct that the bells be rung so that we ascertain if we have a quorum or not. Order. We have a quorum. I recognize the Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that we proceed to order number 15 on our today's order paper. Thank you.
Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
Notice of motion number 15, Honorable Mnangagwa.
Madam Speaker, I move the motion in my name.
Who seconds?
I second.
I call upon Honorable Mnangagwa to move his motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. I rise to present a report from the Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, and on the report of the first and second quarter budget reports for the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare and the Ministry of Skills Audit, as well as the Public Service Commission. The report is titled SC 2026. Madam Speaker, this report presents a consolidated and analytical summary of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare's review of the 2025 first and second quarter budget performance reports for the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, the Ministry of Skills Audit and Development, and the Public Service Commission in accordance with sections 32 to 35 of the Public Finance Management Act, which require each ministry to submit periodic financial and non-financial performance information to Parliament. Quarterly budget performance reports are a key accountability instrument which enable the Portfolio Committee to exercise oversight on the utilization of appropriated resources. Overall, the committee found that both ministries and the Commission operated under severe and persistent cash flow constraints characterized by low and erratic treasury releases. These constraints materially undermined budget execution, weakened service delivery, particularly for vulnerable populations, and increased the risk of arrears accumulation. While both ministries reported achievement of several performance targets, the committee is concerned about the credibility, depth, and sustainability of reported outputs, given very low levels of expenditure during the first half of 2025. Madam Speaker, the objectives of the report are to assess whether each ministry achieved or made incredible progress towards its 2025 first and second quarter budget performance targets, and whether reported achievements reflect measurable outcomes aligned to NDS 1. Evaluate the level of resource utilization against quarterly estimates and annual allocations, including analysis by program and by economic classification. Identify major bottlenecks, including cash release constraints, procurement delays, vacancies, reporting gaps, and arrears affecting program execution. Determine the implications of underperformance on service delivery, fiscal sustainability, and vulnerability outcomes, and propose corrective actions. In terms of methodology, Madam Speaker, the committee reviewed the 2025 first and second quarter budget performance reports submitted by each ministry and considered the analytical briefs prepared by the Parliamentary Budget Office for each quarterly report. The committee also sought clarification from the ministries on some grey areas. Then I turn to findings on the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare. The first quarter budget overview. The ministry's 2025 budget of 17.71 billion ZiG was structurally concentrated in social benefits, reflecting its core mandate of social protection. The first quarter budget was allocated across the three programs with a major share directed towards social welfare. While this alignment is appropriate, it exposes service delivery to immediate risk when cash releases are delayed or inadequate. Underfunding of social benefits directly affects food assistance, disability services, education support, and institutional care. Madam Speaker, budget utilization across all programs was extremely low. Program 1, which is Policy and Administration, utilized 16.709 million ZiG, which is merely 7.5% of the quarterly expenditure target of 219.993 million. Program 2, Labour Administration, utilized 70.762 million ZiG, which is only 27% of the target. Program 3, Social Welfare, utilized 15% of its expenditure target. The ministry reported that residential care facilities' supply of basic needs was affected, and the payment of first-term school fees and the procurement of uniforms and stationery for children in institutional care were also affected. Further, assistive devices for persons with disabilities could not be procured, and some vocational training centers were threatening to withdraw students with disabilities due to non-payment of fees. In addition, the provision of entitlement grants to vulnerable groups could not be done. It was further reported that arrears to transporters who provided services during the food deficit distribution program continued to accumulate. Madam Speaker, the ministry reported that Treasury did not release cash for capital grants in the first quarter. This affected the rehabilitation of infrastructure for ZIPAM, notwithstanding that this expenditure had been budgeted for. Then I turn to budget utilization by economic classification. All expenditure heads had low utilization rates as follows: compensation of employees, 63%, use of goods and services, 13%, current transfers, 13%, other expenses, 10%, social benefits, 14%, and acquisition of non-financial assets, 33%. Then I turn to the achievements, Madam Speaker. The ministry reported that for Program 2, it had either reached or surpassed most of its quota targets, except for the completion of employment policy and employer compliance to labor standards. The committee noted that non-completion of the employment policy and weak employer compliance may compromise labor market regulation reforms and the protection of workers' rights. In the second quarter, there was modest improvement, particularly under Program 3, which utilized about 70% of its quarterly target. However, cumulative utilization by mid-year remained low at approximately 24% of the annual budget. Madam Speaker, Program 1, that is Policy and Administration, utilized 52,938,816 ZIG, which is merely 27% of the expenditure target. The budget utilization rate is a slight improvement from an absorption rate of 7.5% reported in the first quarter. For the period January to June 2025, the Ministry of Public Service utilized 69,648,181 ZIG, translating to a utilization rate of 9%. Program 2, Madam Speaker, utilized only 23% of its target. For the period January to June, the program had a budget utilization rate of 13%, and Program 3 utilized only 70%. The ministry reported that there were low cash releases, which mainly affected flagship programs such as BEAM and the food deficit mitigation strategy. The committee urges Treasury to make timely payment of BEAM funds in order to ensure access to education for vulnerable learners and to stabilize school operations, which depend on BEAM funds to cover operational costs such as teaching materials and the utility bills. I would add my own words, Madam Speaker, that failure by Treasury to release BEAM funds affects schools in a manner that has eroded their ability to function. You realize, Madam Speaker, that a lot of schools are affected where we have these programs like NAF, NASH, like the Better Schools program. So what happens, Madam Speaker, is that when a school is, say, 500 students and only 100 students pay fees, sometimes maybe more than half are on BEAM, what happens is affiliations for the programs I mentioned above are taken for all the students, leaving the school with nothing to fund its processes. Cumulatively, the total expenditure by the Ministry of Public Service in the first 6 months of the 2025 financial year was 2,820,213,290 ZIG, translating to a budget utilization rate of only 24%. Then I turn, Madam Speaker, to audit and governance issues. Although progress was made in addressing some Auditor General findings, out of 12 findings, 7 were addressed while 5 were outstanding, including non-submission of returns, payments in arrears, and weaknesses in BEAM and cash transfer programs. Furthermore, continued qualified opinions signal weaknesses in internal controls and compliance. The ministry explained that work was underway to prepare and submit statutory returns within the prescribed statutory deadlines. The ministry also explained that requests for budgetary support were made to Treasury to finance critical expenses where approved budget had run out. Also, special audits were undertaken on the BEAM program following matters raised by the Auditor General, and recoveries are being made where overpayments were made. Madam Speaker, I turn to key findings on the Ministry of Skills Audit and Development. The Ministry's 2025 budget of 253.2 million is heavily skewed towards acquisition of non-financial assets and use of goods and services, with a relatively small share allocated to compensation of employees. The committee noted persistent imbalance with a higher share of resources allocated to policy and administration relative to the core program of skills audit and development. The ministry utilized only about 11% of its first quarter budget, with the program 1 at 13% and program 2 at 9%. Program 1 utilized 10,055,105 ZIG, which is 13% of the quarter target of 76,768,000 ZIG. Program 2 utilized only 9% of its target. The low percentage utilization under Program 2 is of concern because it affects the ministry's ability to perform its core business, including conducting an informal sector skill needs assessment, crafting of scholarships policy, and careers guidance policy, and the promotion of informal apprenticeship programs. During the first quarter, the two programs only utilized 11% of the estimated budget due to non-release of funds. All expenditure heads utilized less than the targeted funds for the quarter. Acquisition of non-financial assets utilized 6.122 million ZIG against a quarter target of 109.82 million, translating to the lower utilization rate of 6%. Use of goods and services utilized 22% of the estimated budget for the first quarter. This raises concern over the ministry's ability to achieve set targets in the first quarter. I turn, Madam Speaker, ma'am, to the second quarter performance for the Ministry of Skills Audit and Development. The budget for the second quarter was 59,007,000 ZIG, translating to 23.3% of the total 2025 budget. Policy and administration was allocated 69% of the estimated budget for the quarter, while Program 2, Skills Audit and Development, was allocated 31% of the estimated budget. The low percentage utilization under Program 2 continues to undermine the achievement of skills development and alignment of skills to industry requirements. Both programs' budget utilization improved to about 34% for the second quarter, but cumulative utilization by mid-year remained low at around 14% of the annual allocation. Treasury cash releases remained unpredictable and insufficient. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I turn to performance achievements and credibility risks. The ministry, however, reported achievements and surpassing of many annual targets by mid-year. These include skills needs assessments, stakeholder engagements, diaspora database development, and program harmonization. I turn to institutional capacity constraints. The ministry had 177 approved posts, of which 94 remained vacant. Persistent vacancies were identified as structural weaknesses affecting planning and decentralization. The ministry's request for additional posts to establish provincial structures remains unresolved, thus limiting its ability to implement skills audits and programs at district levels. Arrears and fiscal transparency. The ministry repeatedly failed to report on arrears to service providers. This omission, Madam Speaker, ma'am, conceals fiscal risks, undermines budget credibility, and limits Parliament's ability to assess hidden liabilities that may contribute to public debt pressures. I turn, Madam Speaker, ma'am, to committee's observations. Low and erratic treasury cash releases emerged as the dominant constraint affecting both ministries. Misalignment between approved budgets, quarterly targets, and actual cash flow undermines planning, disrupts service delivery, and increases the likelihood of arrears accumulation. Consistent non-disclosure of arrears represents a major accountability gap. Without transparent arrears registers, Parliament cannot assess the true fiscal and debt position, sustainability of reported performance, or risks to service continuity. Underfunding of social protection programs disproportionately affected orphans, persons with disabilities, the elderly, and food insecure households. These gaps undermine NDS1 commitments and expose vulnerable populations to heightened socio-economic risks. The committee observed that predictable disbursements are critical for social benefits execution. The persistent pattern of low disbursement to social benefits undermines the ministry's ability to meet statutory and policy obligations in social protection, potentially shifting costs to future quarters and increasing the risk of arrears. I turn, Madam Speaker, to committee's recommendations. Treasury and the relevant line ministries should agree on predictable cash release frameworks for critical social protection and skills development programs at the beginning of each quarter. Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare should prioritize payments of social benefits, BIM and cash transfers, and provide regular consolidated performance and arrears reports, including for NASA and ZIPAM by end of each quarter. The Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare and the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion should always treat disability issues as human rights issues rather than as matters of social protection. The Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare should complete the employment policy and the compliance strategy and come up with the frames of inspections with the Ministry of Finance to financing the inspections by June 2026. Both ministries should strengthen target setting and performance indicators to emphasize quality, outcomes, and sustainability aligned to realistic cash flow scenarios at the beginning of each quarter. Gender and province disaggregated staffing at beneficiary data should be routinely reported to support equity, decentralization, and gender-responsive budgeting. Outstanding audit findings should be addressed through time-bound remedial action plans to restore financial management credibility. Madam Speaker, may I now turn to the Public Service Commission. And I start with strategic planning and human resources. The Commission reported 464 vacant posts out of an approved establishment of 2,065 positions, representing a vacancy rate of approximately 22.4%. Such a vacancy rate may compromise the Commission's ability to discharge its constitutional and statutory mandate effectively, particularly in areas of human capital development, pension administration, and performance management. Persistent staffing gaps may negatively affect service delivery and program implementation. Madam Speaker, the Commission received an annual allocation of 10.723 billion ZiG distributed across 3 programs as follows. Program 1, Corporate Services, 4%. Program 2, Human Capital Development and Management, 3%. And Program 3, Pay and Benefits Development and Management, 93%. The allocation demonstrates government's prioritization of pay and benefits, which constitute the core mandate of the Commission. I turn, Madam Speaker, to second quarter budget utilization. By the end of the second quarter, overall budget utilization stood at 32%, while utilization of disbursed funds was 40%. Cumulative expenditure was only 19% of the total 2025 budget. Then I turn to program performance, Madam Speaker, which was as follows. Program 1, Corporate Services achieved approximately 99% utilization of its quarterly budget. Program 2, Human Capital Development and Management, utilized 45% of its quarterly target, an improvement from the previous quarter. Program 3 utilized only 28.6% of its quarterly target, reflecting a decline from 39% in the previous quarter. Low absorption under Program 3 is particularly concerning given that it accounts for 93% of the Commission's total allocation. I turn, Madam Speaker, to expenditure by economic classification. Compensation of employees recorded only 28% utilization of its quarterly target and 38% of disbursed funds. Use of goods and services achieved 81% utilization, indicating relatively efficient spending. No disbursements were made for social benefits, meaning no implementation of welfare-related programs occurred during the quarter. Expenditure on acquisition of non-financial assets exceeded the quarterly target by 31%, raising concerns about planning and financial controls. I turn, Madam Speaker, to performance management. The Commission reported several achievements during the second quarter, including alignment of 21 line ministry structures against a target of 17, electronic registration of 5,314 candidates against a target of 5,000, capacitation of 1,948 disciplinary authorities against a target of 1,250. Certain targets, including review of the job evaluation framework and labor practices capacity building workshops, were not met due to limited release of funds. I turn, Madam Speaker, to revenue performance. The Commission collected 43.5 million cumulatively by the end of the second quarter and $2.48 million in the second quarter. All revenue was remitted to the Consolidated Revenue Fund in compliance with Section 302 of the Constitution, which is commendable. I turn, Madam Speaker, to committee's observations. Financial constraints continue to affect implementation of key reforms. Overall, low utilization delays key reforms such as salary reviews, digitalization, and pension processing. Non-disbursement of funds for social benefits adversely affects public servants' welfare. I turn, Madam Speaker, to committee's recommendations. The Commission must develop a time-bound action plan to address all outstanding audit findings by 31 December 2026. Treasury should ensure timely and adequate release of funds to avoid implementation delays. Social benefit allocations should be prioritized to safeguard public servants' welfare in each quarter. The Commission should develop and implement a staffing rationalization and recruitment plan to address the 22.4% vacancy rate by end of September 2026. Madam Speaker, the committee concluded that while good ministries complied with PFMA reporting requirements, budget execution in the first half of 2025 was severely constrained by inadequate and unpredictable cash releases, persistent underfunding of core programs, weak arrears reporting, and questionable alignment between expenditure and reported performance undermine service delivery effectiveness and fiscal credibility. I so submit, and I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The question before the House is a motion by Honorable Mnangagwa that this House considers and adopts the report of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare on the Ministries of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare and Skills Audit and Development and Public Service Commission's 2025 first and second quarterly budget performance reports, SC 21 of 2026. Is there any debate? I call upon Honorable Bajila.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good afternoon once again. I rise to express my full support of the report on the Portfolio Committee on Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare for the 2025 first and second quarter budget performance reports for the three MDAs, that is the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, the Ministry of Skills, Audit and Development, as well as the Public Service Commission. Madam Speaker, this report, as has been read out by Honorable Mnangagwa, presents a balanced, evidence-based and objective assessment of the performance of these institutions in accordance with the Public Finance Management Act. The committee correctly identifies the principal challenges confronting these institutions. That is the persistent mismatch between Parliament's budget approvals and the actual Treasury cash releases. Ministries cannot effectively implement programs when approved appropriations are not matched by predictable disbursements. Consequently, Parliament's oversight role extends beyond approving budgets to ensuring that appropriated resources are released in a timely and predictable manner. The findings show that despite commendable efforts by the ministries and departments to achieve performance targets, budget utilization remains significantly below expectations because of erratic cash releases by Treasury. This situation undermined service delivery, weakened social protection systems, and delayed critical reforms in our human resource management. Madam Speaker, the greatest victims of these funding constraints are not government institutions, but ordinary Zimbabweans. The report demonstrates that delayed funding disrupted the Basic Education Assistance Module BIM, it disrupted the Food Deficit Mitigation Program, it disrupted disability support, it disrupted institutional care for children, it disrupted the procurement of assistive devices and a grant for vulnerable communities. The programs, therefore, are not luxuries. They are constitutional obligations aimed at protecting our vulnerable citizens. This directly relates to Section 30 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which obliges the state to provide social welfare and social protection, as well as Section 19, which requires government to prioritize the welfare of children. Therefore, improving budget execution as proposed by the report presented by the chairperson is not merely a financial matter, it is a constitutional imperative. So whenever we fail, whenever any of us neglects or does anything that does not lead to full budget execution, we are violating the rights of the people of Zimbabwe, we are violating our constitutional obligations. The committee also correctly highlights the consequences of underfunding the Ministry of Skills, Audit and Development. Zimbabwe cannot industrialize without adequately investing in human capital. The continued underfunding of skills audits, apprenticeship programs, career guidances, and labor market intelligence weakens our capacity to prepare our young people for the future economy. Madam Speaker, this report also aligns Zimbabwe strongly with the National Development Strategy 2. NDS 2 places significant emphasis on human capital development, social protection, employment creation, public sector transformation, inclusive economic growth, and results-based management. Madam Speaker, none of these priorities can be realized if ministries consistently receive a fraction of their approved quarterly budgets. Effective implementation of NDS 2, therefore, requires predictable financing, strong institutions, and measurable performance. Similarly, the report presented by the chairperson advances Zimbabwe's commitment to attaining sustainable development goals. Specifically, SDG number 1, which speaks to no poverty, is advanced by the report through strengthening social protection systems. SDG number 4, which speaks to quality education, is advanced by this report through speaking to timely financing of BIM and the skills development. SDG number 8, which speaks to decent work and economic growth, is advanced by this report because it speaks to issues of labor market reforms and the skills alignment. SDG number 10, which speaks to reduction of inequalities, is advanced by this report as it speaks to the protection of persons with disabilities and vulnerable groups. SDG number 16 is advanced by this report as it speaks to improve financial accountability, transparency, and public sector governance in line with the Public Finance Management Act. Madam Speaker, SDG number 17 is advanced by this report as it speaks to partnership for the goals. This report speaks to improved coordination between Treasury, line ministries, and other departments for oversight of these institutions. Therefore, supporting this report means supporting Zimbabwe's international development commitments. Madam Speaker, the committee's recommendations are also consistent with internationally recognized standard practices. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank consistently emphasize the importance of credible budgeting, cash management, and expenditure predictability. Similarly, the Public Expenditure and Financial Accountability Framework identifies predictable budget execution, transparency of arrears, and reliable reporting as essential indicators of sound public finance management. The committee's concerns regarding hidden arrears, weak reporting, and inconsistent cash releases therefore reflect internationally acceptable principles of fiscal governance. Likewise, the recommendation to improve gender and provincial disaggregation of data aligns well with sustainable development goals relating to monitoring standards and gender-responsive budget practices adopted across many African countries by this time. Madam Speaker, I also commend the committee for drawing attention to unresolved Auditor General findings. Accountability cannot end with publication of audit reports. Ministries should be required to implement correct corrective actions within clearly defined timelines with periodic reporting back to this August House. The committee also correctly identifies the large vacancy levels within both the Ministry of Skills, Audit and Development and the Public Service Commission. These vacancies reduce institutional effectiveness, delay decentralization, and compromise service delivery. While supporting all the committee's recommendations, Madam Speaker, I respectfully propose the following additional measures. 1. Critical programs such as BEAM, harmonized cash transfer, disability support, and institutional care should receive protected funding that cannot be delayed except under exceptional circumstances. These are our vulnerable people, and they demand and deserve that care for them be not erratic, but be consistent. Also, Madam Speaker, Treasury should establish a real-time digital dashboard showing approved budgets, releases, expenditure commitments, and arrears for every ministry to strengthen parliamentary oversight. It must be possible for members of this August House to log into a dashboard and see that for this quarter, so much is expected to go to the Ministry of Skills Audit, so much has gone, this much is the arrear, and this is how this expenditure is being respected and taken care of. That kind of continuous and digitized platform will improve our oversight systems as this August House. And once we have got more open and transparent systems, the confidence of our people in the things that we do will go up, and Zimbabwe will become a stapler economically and socially. Madam Speaker, ministries that consistently achieve program targets and comply with audit recommendations should receive priority considerations during quarterly allocations. Also, the Ministry of Skills Audit and Development should publish a 5-year national skills demand forecast in collaboration with industry, universities, technical colleges, and the private sector to align education with labor market needs. One of the issues that we need to get out of skills audit is that our people, wherever they are, they should see that the trajectory of growth for Zimbabwe is this way, and the skills that will be needed for that kind of growth are A, B, C, D. That way, our young people will have their minds and their focus aligned with the future economy of this country, rather than to continue to develop skills in this direction, when in actual fact, we anticipate that our economy will grow in that direction. Therefore, a 5-year national skills demand forecast is an imperative for the Ministry of Skills Audit to publish. Also, Madam Speaker, the issue of disability inclusive budgeting. Every ministry should mainstream disability budgeting in line with the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, rather than treating disability solely as a welfare issue. The chairperson was clear that the issue of disability must not be looked solely as a welfare issue, but as a holistic human rights issue, to the extent that all ministries should have what we call should mainstream disability issues in their budgeting, because disability issues are cross-cutting. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, this report reminds us that a budget is only meaningful when resources are released, programs are implemented, and citizens receive the intended services. The committee has discharged its oversight responsibility diligently by identifying weaknesses, recognizing achievements, and proposing practical reforms. Supporting this report is therefore supporting stronger public financial management, improved service delivery, protection of vulnerable citizens, and achievement of our development targets as a country. I therefore urge this House to unanimously adopt the committee's report and call upon Treasury and the respective ministries to implement its recommendations fully and expeditiously. I so submit.
Thank you. Further debate, I call upon the government chief.
Madam Speaker, I move that debate to now adjourn.
Seconds.
I second, Madam Speaker.
It has been moved that the debate be now adjourned. Is there any debate? I put the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those who have that opinion say aye. Those of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. Ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the debate is adjourned to what day, Government Chief?
To tomorrow, Madam Speaker.
The debate is adjourned tomorrow.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
It has been moved that the House do now adjourn. Is there any debate? I put the question that the House do now adjourn. Those who have that opinion say aye. Those of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the House is adjourned to what day, Government Chief?
To tomorrow, Madam Speaker.
The House is adjourned to tomorrow.